Do you love novels, but don't have time to read thousands of chapters? Imagine listening to your favorite stories anytime, anywhere, while driving, working, or relaxing. Here, you'll find premium audiobooks from Pocket FM, Audible, Webnovel, Wuxia, and more, all in one place. Every novel is a one-time payment, no subscriptions, no monthly fees, lifetime access. The full novel list and prices are in the description below. Once you choose a novel, just DM me on Telegram, WhatsApp, or Discord. After payment via PayPal, Ko-fi, or Patreon, you get permanent access to the audiobook on Telegram. And if the novel is ongoing, all future updates are included. Check the description, pick your story, and start listening today. Before we start the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button. Enjoy, and let's go.
451, Chapter 451. Don't say too many jokes, it will make me feel that there is a problem with your IQ. Akaza replied to Ryaji with mockery. Ryaji knew that. Don't say too many jokes, it will make me feel that there is a problem with your IQ. Akaza replied to Ryaji with mockery. Ryaji knew that Akaza would not release the person, and so he did not continue to say anything more, but rather patted Tanjiro's shoulder, signaling Tanjiro to prepare to set off. At the same time, Ryaji also gave Zenitsu Agatsuma a look, signaling him to prepare to use sound to identify the location. Uzui Tengen now had to be led by the nose by Akaza, and so at this final juncture, he suddenly grabbed Ryaji's hand, and then said to Ryaji with a pleading look, "I beg you. Although this request is very unreasonable, you must save them." New mission activated. Mission, rescue Makio and Suma. Mission completion reward, successfully rescue one person. The host will receive the reward of opening the transparent world domain. Successfully rescue 2 people, the host will receive the reward of opening the mark again. Mission failure penalty, no penalty. And just at this time, the broadcast of the superdimensional transversal system rang out. Ryaji, who had received the mission issued by the system, nodded to Uzui Tengen, only then did Uzui Tengen release Ryaji. At this time, the rain was already falling harder and harder, everything around them became hazy. Let me say a final reminder, unrelated personnel must not follow. If anyone dares to follow, I will unceremoniously kill the woman in my hands. Akaza continued to warn the others. However, no one paid attention to Akaza. Akaza then coldly snorted and gestured to Ryaji, "Keep up, don't fall behind. Otherwise, you will lose the opportunity to save people." After he finished speaking, Akaza's figure flashed, and carrying Makio, he transformed into a black shadow, and darted out like lightning. Ryaji and Tanjiro immediately followed, closely following behind Akaza. Akaza naturally did not have any objections to Ryaji and Tanjiro closely following behind. This was also what Akaza was happy to see. If Ryaji and Tanjiro deliberately kept their distance, then it would show that there was a high probability that Ryaji and Tanjiro would use making marks to lead the way for those behind them. Only by closely following behind him could Akaza monitor Ryaji and Tanjiro's movements at any time, preventing Ryaji and Tanjiro from making marks. Ryaji and Tanjiro also knew in their hearts that they could not fall behind, and even more dared not have any small actions, otherwise once they made him suspicious, then it was likely that Akaza would kill Makio without hesitation, and give up on this operation plan. Akaza turned his head back to look at the movements behind him, and then looked at the sky, confirming that there were no abnormalities, before he continued to look towards the direction he was heading. And at the moment that Ryaji and Tanjiro set off, Zenitsu Agatsuma had already perked up his ears and carefully sensed Ryaji's step frequency. If it was not raining, then it would have been very easy for Zenitsu Agatsuma to sense it, but the noise of countless raindrops hitting the ground, all of a sudden gave Zenitsu Agatsuma a great deal of interference. Uzui Tengen also did not dare to speak, quietly watching Zenitsu Agatsuma. Because Uzui Tengen knew that the heavy rain had rendered the Kashagi crow useless. In the heavy rain, even if the Kashagi crow was willing to fly in the heavy rain, it would also be unable to fly, so it was simply unable to track Ryaji, whose speed of action was extremely fast. Therefore, now the only thing that he could rely on was Zenitsu Agatsuma's ears. However, the noise of the heavy rain would definitely also have an impact on Zenitsu Agatsuma's judgment, so Uzui Tengen dared not speak to interfere with Zenitsu Agatsuma again. Tier $10 Casual Reader, 20+ Advanced Chapter $20 Intermediate Reader, 40 plus Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80 plus Advanced Chapter. 452, Chapter 452. Fortunately, the sound of Ryaji's toes touching the ground was very recognizable. It was a tick sound like water droplets dripping into the. Fortunately, the sound of Ryaji's toes touching the ground was very recognizable. It was a tick sound like water droplets dripping into the water surface, very crisp. Zenitsu Agatsuma still found Ryaji's extremely recognizable footsteps in the dense and noisy sound of the rain. In reality, Ryaji could have run without making any sound, but in order to allow Zenitsu Agatsuma to identify the location, Ryaji had to deliberately make footsteps. And the noise of the rain, although it caused interference to Zenitsu Agatsuma, also made it even more impossible for Akaza to detect any abnormalities, unless Akaza's ears were extraordinarily sensitive. Keep up. At this time, Zenitsu Agatsuma then had movement, and with a quick wave of his hand, he chased after them. Uzui Tengen, Inashuk, and also Hattori Kyujo immediately followed behind Zenitsu Agatsuma. Not a single person spoke. The main sounds on the street were the sound of the heavy rain, and also the deliberately lowered footsteps. The footsteps were mainly from Zenitsu Agatsuma, Hattori Kyujo, and also Inashuk. Uzui Tengen, because his own strength had reached the level of a Hashira, was able to completely hide his own footsteps, and also Uzui Tengen was a ninja. Doing these things was not difficult for him. Because it was raining heavily, all the residents on the street had already gone to take shelter from the rain. Apart from Zenitsu Agatsuma's group, basically no other people could be seen on the street. And Ryaji and Tanjiro followed Akaza and ran very fast. Before long they ran out of the red light district, and gradually set off towards the depths of the mountains and forests. The rainy mountain road was very slippery, but because there were many dense trees, the sound of the rain was partially blocked, and Ryaji's footsteps were also clearer by a bit. Zenitsu Agatsuma always kept Ryaji at a distance where he could not be seen with the naked eye, but could hear his footsteps, because Zenitsu Agatsuma was afraid that if he followed too closely, he would be discovered by Akaza. The haziness that the heavy rain had placed on the line of sight could also be considered to have put a layer of disguise on Zenitsu Agatsuma's group, who were following behind. During this period, Akaza would check the situation behind him from time to time, but he did not discover any abnormalities. Although there were no abnormalities, Akaza did not feel that the others would be so honest as to do nothing. For this kind of situation, in reality, Akaza's side had also long since had a method to respond, for the sake of preventing Uzui Tengen from supporting Ryaji and Tanjiro, and completely separating Ryaji and Tanjiro from the others. Allowing Ryaji, Tanjiro, and the others to be separated, was also a smokescreen that Akaza's side had thrown out to Ryaji, for the sake of making Ryaji believe that Akaza's side was for the sake of targeting himself and Tanjiro. In reality, the ones who were in danger were Uzui Tengen and the others. So all of Akaza's vigilance at this time, in reality, was acting for Ryaji to see, for the sake of not allowing Ryaji to discover any abnormalities. And things were also just as Akaza's side had planned, as Zenitsu Agatsuma led Uzui Tengen, Inashuk, and also Hattori Kyujo were about to leave the Yoshiwara red light district, and continue to chase towards the mountains and forests. They were blocked by a man wearing a purple kimono, with a ponytail tied, and his hair draped over his shoulders. Zenitsu Agatsuma, Uzui Tengen, Inashuk, and also Hattori Kyujo all stopped their footsteps, because a dangerous aura had already enveloped the giant wooden archway of the Yoshiwara red light district. Uzui-san, it seems that we have encountered an interception. It is estimated that Ryaji-senpai and Tanjiro will have to face it alone. Zenitsu Agatsuma turned his head to say to Uzui Tengen, his tone carrying a hint of fear, because Zenitsu Agatsuma could feel that the one blocking him was a very powerful demon. Tier, $10 Casual Reader, 20 plus Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40 plus Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80 plus Advanced Chapter. 453, Chapter 453. And this demon who was blocking Zenitsu Agatsuma's group was precisely the upper rank one, Kokushibo. Zenitsu Agatsuma had not come into Kant. And this demon who was blocking Zenitsu Agatsuma's group was precisely the upper rank one, Kokushibo. Zenitsu Agatsuma had not come into contact with Kokushibo, so he also did not recognize Kokushibo, and also because of the heavy rain, Zenitsu Agatsuma could not clearly see Kokushibo's face, so he did not know that Kokushibo had 6 eyes growing on his face. Uzui Tengen also had not come into contact with Kokushibo either, but Uzui Tengen also felt Kokushibo's extremely strong oppression, so Uzui Tengen could basically be certain that he was an upper-rank demon of the 12 Kazuki without a doubt. Inashuk and Hattori Kyujo had seen Kokushibo, especially Inashuk. From Kokushibo's familiar figure, he immediately recognized Kokushibo. "You all continue to chase Ryaji, leave this place to me." Uzui Tengen immediately instructed the others. After he finished speaking, Uzui Tengen then proactively launched an attack towards Kokushibo. Sound breathing, first form, roar. Sound breathing, first form, roar. The sound breathing user wields his sharp blade, it will tear the surrounding air, producing a powerful air explosion. As Uzui Tengen charged towards Kokushibo, he had already drawn the 2 double swords on his back. Uzui Tengen's 2 swords were not swords in the style of samurai swords, but rather curved swords similar to those used for slaughtering cattle. The length was not long, but the blade was very wide. The handles of the 2 swords were connected with iron chains. If the blade part was removed, it really had a bit of the flavor of nunchucks. As Uzui Tengen approached Kokushibo, Kokushibo had already drawn his sword and made a counterattack. Moon breathing, third form, loathsome moon, chains. Moon breathing, third form, loathsome moon, chains. Kokushibo wields his sword to carry out a multi-stage continuous slash, while slashing out several crescent moon blades. There are also 2 curved moon energy blades produced on the ground that advance forward. The 2 double swords in Uzui Tengen's hands then slashed onto the crescent moon blades that Kokushibo had slashed out. Immediately the sound of clanging collisions rang out, and at the same time, it was accompanied by sounds of explosions. BOMM, BOMM, BOMM. Fortunately, Uzui Tengen's attack had a blasting effect, which was able to shatter the crescent moon blades that Kokushibo had slashed out, but the flying fragments did not have eyes. Although some of them stabbed into Kokushibo's body, Uzui Tengen also could not avoid being injured by the fragments. Uzui Tengen knew that fighting like this would wear him down, and so he proactively retreated to create distance. At the same time, Uzui Tengen also threw out dense shuriken towards Kokushibo to restrain him. Kokushibo was completely unaffected in any way, it was only that his sleeves had been blown to shreds by Uzui Tengen's attack. Kokushibo reacted extremely quickly, and with a casual wave of his demon sword, he knocked away all of the shuriken, and then launched a pursuit towards Uzui Tengen. Moon breathing, 7th form, mirror of misfortune, moonlit. Moon breathing, 7th form, mirror of misfortune, moonlit. Kokushibo wields his evolved demon sword, and sweeps it towards the ground. Kokushibo will swing out 5 giant shockwaves that travel along the ground for 50 meters. As the shockwaves advance, they will split into many arc-shaped shockwaves. It could be seen that at the moment that Kokushibo swung his sword, the demon sword in Kokushibo's hand quickly evolved into another form. The attack range that Kokushibo launched this time was very wide. The attack affected Zenitsu Agatsuma, Inashuk, and also Hattori Kyujo. As the shockwaves approached, Inashuk did not know why, but he froze in place, without any evasive movements. Tier, $10 casual reader, 20+ advanced chapter. $20 intermediate reader, 40+ advanced chapter. $40 expert reader, 80+ advanced chapter. 454, chapter 454. Zenitsu Agatsuma quickly avoided the attack, and only then did he look towards Inashuk, who was as if he had lost his soul, not moving at all. Inashuk, get out of the way. Zenitsu Agatsuma shouted loudly. Just as Kokushibo's attack was about to touch Inashuk, Hattori Kyujo blocked in front of the shockwave, and activated her breathing technique. Flame breathing, 4th form, blooming flame undulation. It was just the defensive technique that the flame Hashira Kyojuro Rengoku had used when fighting against Kokushibo. As Hattori Kyujo kept wielding the Nichiren blade in her hand, a rotating circular fire blade wall then appeared in front of Hattori Kyujo. The shockwave produced by Kokushibo's attack then crashed into the blooming flame undulation. It was just that different from Kyojuro Rengoku's situation. As soon as Hattori Kyujo's attack came into contact with Kokushibo's attack, the blooming flame undulation was shattered all of a sudden. Hattori Kyujo's entire person then crashed into Inashuk all of a sudden. knocking Inashuk to the ground along with her. "Kyujo!" Zenitsu Agitsuma shouted excitedly. And just as Zenitsu Agitsuma was worrying about Hattori Kyujo, Kokushibo then approached Zenitsu Agitsuma. At this moment, Zenitsu Agitsuma only felt a chill on his spine, and then everything in front of his eyes turned black, and he fainted on the ground. The demon sword that Kokushibo should have slashed on Zenitsu Agitsuma's neck missed because of Zenitsu Agitsuma's sudden fall to the ground. Kokushibo could not help but feel astonished. Uzui Tengen was in mid-air, unable to make any evasive maneuvers. Seeing Kokushibo's shockwave approaching, he immediately threw an explosive at his feet. The explosion of the explosive also alleviated Kokushibo's shockwave. At the same time, the huge shock also blew Uzui Tengen's figure away, and then he crashed into the archway of the Yoshiwara red light district. In just 2 rounds of confrontation, the ground had already been destroyed by Kokushibo beyond recognition. And Uzui Tengen saw that Kokushibo was standing in front of the fallen Zenitsu Agitsuma, and his heart all of a sudden rose to his throat. "Damn it! If you have the guts, come at me." Uzui Tengen, enduring the pain in his chest, then shouted at Kokushibo with a strained voice. Kokushibo did not pay attention to Uzui Tengen, because Kokushibo's thoughts were very clear, which was to first prioritize resolving Zenitsu Agitsuma, Inashuk, and also Hattori Kyujo. These ants who were not worth a single blow, because Kokushibo did not intend to let anyone here leave. Kokushibo once again raised his sword and slashed towards Zenitsu Agitsuma's head, who was lying on the ground. Only the sound of a crisp clang was heard. At the moment that Kokushibo's demon sword fell, Zenitsu Agitsuma suddenly turned around, and at the same time, he drew the Nichiren blade at his waist and blocked it in front of his neck. Uzui Tengen, seeing that Kokushibo had not succeeded, immediately charged towards Kokushibo again, for the sake of saving Zenitsu Agitsuma. Sound breathing, second form, dazzling echoes. Sound breathing, second form, dazzling echoes. The sound breathing user uses the breathing method to produce sound rhythm, causing the weapon that is being held to enter an extremely high frequency vibration state. Once the weapon touches a metal object or the other party's weapon, it will transmit the vibration to the past, causing temporary paralysis to the other party. At the same time, at the moment that the weapon comes into contact and collides, it will emit an extremely ear-piercing sound wave, like lightning flashing and thunder rumbling, which can instantly make the enemy enter a state of tinnitus, thereby interfering with the enemy's actions. If the sound wave is not shielded at the first opportunity, the ear-piercing sound wave will cause people's heads to ache to the point of splitting. Uzui Tengen charged to Kokushibo's side, and without any hesitation, he slashed towards the demon sword that Kokushibo was holding. Tier, $10 Casual Reader, 20+ Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40+ Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80+ Advanced Chapter. 455, Chapter 455. Because for the sound breathing user, the sound rhythm is maintained and produced by Uzui Tengen's breathing, so Uzui Tengen's arms and weapons are in the same frequency. Therefore Uzui Tengen will not be affected by the vibration of his own weapons, and will also not be affected by the paralysis effect when the weapon attacks the other party. In the next second, Uzui Tengen's double sword slashed on Kokushibo's demon sword, immediately emitting extremely ear-piercing high-frequency sound waves, and the raindrops that fell on Uzui Tengen and Kokushibo were also strangely affected by the sound waves, and actually froze in mid-air. If it were not for the fact that the raindrops in other places were still constantly hitting the ground, it would make people mistakenly think that time had stopped. It was also because Uzui Tengen himself was in the pulse frequency of the sound rhythm, so the ear-piercing high-frequency sound waves could not enter Uzui Tengen's ears, therefore the sound waves also could not affect Uzui Tengen himself. Immediately afterwards, those raindrops that were frozen in mid-air suddenly began to be affected by the sound waves, and vibrated at high speed, as if something extremely unstable and drastic was happening inside, and finally the raindrops were torn apart by the high-frequency sound waves and turned into water mist. At the same time, it could be seen with the naked eye that Kokushibo's demon sword was also affected by Uzui Tengen's double swords, and was vibrating at high frequency. The muscles of Kokushibo's forearm were contracting tightly, and the veins were bulging. It could be seen that he was using his own strength to restrain the vibration of the demon sword. However, Doing this would not be able to crack Uzui Tenjin's lightning flash, unless Kokushibo could make himself and the vibration remain at the same frequency, or create a vibration with a frequency higher than Uzui Tenjin's to counter it. Kokushibo also knew this, but if he did not use force to grab the demon sword, then the result would be that the demon sword would slip out of Kokushibo's hand. Transparent world. And Kokushibo also felt the impact of the high-frequency sound waves at the first opportunity, and so he immediately allowed himself to enter the domain of the transparent world. Transparent world. This skill is a domain realm type skill. Its essence is to highly concentrate and fuse the divine sense and perception, and close off the body's redundant senses, such as hearing, smell, touch, vision, etc., allowing oneself to enter a very wonderful realm. In this realm, the opener will obtain a new divine sense, and under the divine sense, the bodies of all living things will become transparent, so that the opener can clearly see the opponent's physical state, such as the heartbeat, muscles, the movement state of the lungs, and the flow of blood, using this information, so that they can better judge the opponent's next action. At the same time, the muscles of the opener will also be enhanced, and adrenaline will reach peak levels, so in this transparent world state, it will give the opponent the illusion that their actions have become slow. This is actually because one's own reaction has been strengthened, so it is not that the opponent has become slow, but rather that one's own reaction has become faster. Of course, Kokushibo opening and allowing himself to enter the transparent world was more for the sake of shielding the ear-piercing sound waves. And the reason why Kokushibo, as a demon, had mastered the transparent world, was actually because Kokushibo was not only a demon, but also a swordsman who had once served the Demon Slayer Corps. Just at this time, the ear-piercing sound waves made the sleeping Zenitsu Agitsuma open his eyes in an instant. At the moment that Zenitsu Agitsuma opened his eyes, a flash of lightning suddenly flashed across the sky, and then there was a deafening thunder, as if Zenitsu Agitsuma was responding to the lightning in the sky. Then, it could be seen that Zenitsu Agitsuma suddenly slapped the floor, and then his entire person turned over and stood up, and finally he squatted half-kneeling on the ground in a very gorgeous posture. Thunder breathing, first form, thunderclap and flash. Tier, $10 casual reader, 20+ advanced chapter. $20 intermediate reader, 40+ advanced chapter. $40 expert reader, 80+ advanced chapter. 456, chapter 456. It could be seen that as Zenitsu Agitsuma was half-squatting, his left hand had already been placed on the scabbard, his right hand was also gripping the hilt, and also Zenitsu Agitsuma was accompanied by many arcs of electricity flashing around him. In the next moment, Zenitsu Agitsuma transformed into a flash of lightning, passing through in front of Kokushibo and Uzui Tenjin. And just as Zenitsu Agitsuma released thunderclap and flash, Kokushibo had long since known and sensed Zenitsu Agitsuma's movements under the transparent world. Because Zenitsu Agitsuma's attack was the neck, Kokushibo then bent his neck backwards 180 degrees at the first opportunity. This action was not something that ordinary people could do, because if ordinary people did this action, then the result would be death. As a result, Zenitsu Agitsuma's thunderclap and flash found nothing. The Nichiren blade grazed Kokushibo's Adam's apple. Kokushibo, whose head was bent backwards, did not lose control of his body because of this, because Kokushibo's arms were already paralyzed, so Kokushibo did not hesitate to kick his foot hard towards Uzui Tenjin's knee. From the part of Kokushibo's attack, it could be known that Kokushibo was ruthless. Because Uzui Tenjin and Kokushibo were very close, and also Kokushibo was in the state of the transparent world, the speed at which he kicked his leg was extremely fast. Uzui Tenjin did not have time for any dodging, and was kicked in the knee by Kokushibo. Then Uzui Tenjin's knee was severely struck, and then his entire person was kicked away by Kokushibo, and in the end he curled up his body, and screamed, "Ah!" If it was a knife wound, Uzui Tenjin would not have screamed, but being severely struck in the knee, this kind of pain could not be compared to a knife wound. However, Uzui Tenjin then used his breathing to suppress the pain in his knee at the first opportunity, but despite this, Uzui Tenjin's expression still carried a painful look, because Uzui Tenjin knew that his actions would definitely be affected by this. Fortunately, Kokushibo was not good at legwork. If this kick had been kicked by Akeza, this master of physical arts, then Uzui Tenjin's knee would definitely have been ruined. Uzui Tengen endured the pain in his left knee, and stood up with difficulty. In order to prevent the injured knee from affecting his actions, Uzui Tengen cut off the nerve connection in his left knee through breathing. This caused Uzui Tengen's left leg to be in a state where it could not be bent. And Kokushibo's arms were still in a paralyzed state and had not eased up, so Kokushibo did not rush to attack, but rather quietly stood still in place. As expected of the upper rank one, he is indeed powerful. I am really disgracing the Hashira. I have only been injured for such a short time. Ryaji and Rengoku did not get injured back then. I am truly ashamed. Uzui Tengen could not help but mutter to himself in his heart. In reality, the most fundamental reason why Kyojuro Rengoku had not been injured the last time he faced Kokushibo was Ryaji's time reversal prop. If Ryaji had not used the time reversal prop, it was estimated that Kyojuro Rengoku would have easily been finished off by Akaza, who had rushed over. So it was not that Uzui Tengen was too weak, but rather that Kokushibo was indeed powerful. It should be known that even if Ryaji had activated the demon god transformation back then, he had not gained much advantage on Kokushibo. Uzui Tengen then turned towards the direction of Inashuk and Hattori Kyujo. From the beginning, Inashuk did not know what was going on, and was in a state as if he had lost his soul. He did not know what was wrong, but it was Zenitsu Agatsuma, who was usually not very reliable, who had given Uzui Tengen a great deal of surprise. Tier, $10 Casual Reader, 20 plus Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40 plus Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80 plus Advanced Chapter. 457, Chapter 457. The reason why Inashuk had lost his soul from the beginning was mainly because of the indelible shadow that Kokushibo had left on Inashuk last time. So after encountering Kokushibo again, Inashuk's heart still instinctively feared Kokushibo, and at the same time, he had the feeling of a chill on his neck. This was also the reason why Inashuk had lost his soul. Fortunately, at a critical moment, Hattori Kyujo helped Inashuk block Kokushibo's attack, which prevented the result of Inashuk being killed or seriously injured. However, it was also because Hattori Kyujo's strength was not enough, that Hattori Kyujo was still injured by Kokushibo, and the organs in her body were impacted. Therefore, when Hattori Kyujo crashed into Inashuk and flew out together, when she landed, she immediately spat a mouthful of blood onto the ground. At the same time, the heavy rain quickly diluted the blood that Hattori Kyujo had spat out, and in the end, it did not leave a single trace. Only then did Inashuk come back to his senses. Seeing Hattori Kyujo spitting blood, Inashuk also became nervous, holding Hattori Kyujo's pretty face, and anxiously asked, "Hattori, are you all right?" Hattori Kyujo, after spitting out the blood, coughed a few times, and Inashuk's palms were stained with the remaining blood that Hattori Kyujo had coughed up. "What are you standing there for? Do you want to die?" Hattori Kyujo could not help but blame him. One of the reasons why Hattori Kyujo had gone to help Inashuk block Kokushibo's attack was that Inashuk had also selflessly helped her block the lower rank 2's fatal blow when dealing with the lower rank 2 last time. Even if Inashuk had not had the heroic act of saving the beauty last time, with Hattori Kyujo's nature, she would still have done so. "Sorry." Inashuk said these two words to Hattori Kyujo with self-reproach. Hattori Kyujo also did not have the intention to pursue the matter, and so she said to Inashuk, "Help me up. Now is not the time to say these things." Inashuk then helped Hattori Kyujo up, and Uzui Tengen, looking at Inashuk and Hattori Kyujo, then spoke, saying, "Pighead, if you can't help, then quickly get the hell out of here. Save yourself from losing your life for nothing." Although the words that Uzui Tengen said were indeed a bit harsh, they were the words that could best awaken Inashuk. "Damn it, what are you saying?" Inashuk also said agitatedly with some anger, but he had indeed been distracted just now. If no one had paid attention to Inashuk at that time, it was estimated that Inashuk would have already been finished off. Thinking of this, Inashuk became even more angry at his own distraction. "Although you are very powerful, I will definitely not be frightened by you in the future. Six-eyed freak." Inashuk's hands then gripped the Nichiren blade at his waist, with an appearance as if he was preparing to face Kokushibo. Hattori Kyujo was also readjusting her breathing state, allowing herself to re-enter the battle state. Just the confrontation from before was already enough to make Hattori Kyujo feel Kokushibo's power, an existence that could kill her with just one slip-up. "Inashuk, You must not be reckless, we have to coordinate well in order to have a chance to kill the upper rank one. Hattori Kyujo, seeing Inashuk's appearance, then thought that Inashuk was going to rush in brainlessly, and so she reminded him. Inashuk naturally knew Kokushibo's power, and so he said to Uzui Tengen, which was rare for him, "You are the only one who can face the six-eyed freak head-on, you go first, and Hattori and I will coordinate with you to carry out a joint strike." Hearing these words, Uzui Tengen could not help but be stunned. He did not expect that Inashuk would actually command him. Tier, $10 Casual Reader, 20 plus Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40 plus Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80 plus Advanced Chapter. 458, Chapter 458. However, the fact was indeed as Inashuk had said, the only one who could face Kokushibo head-on was Uzui Tengen. If it was Inashuk and Hattori Kyujo who went to restrain Kokushibo head-on, they would easily be taken away by Kokushibo together. Just as the battle situation had fallen into a ceasefire, Kokushibo's neck, which had been bent to his back, flipped back again, and at the same time Kokushibo's figure also turned towards Zenitsu Agatsuma. Kokushibo completely ignored Uzui Tengen, who was a Hashira, and instead had more interest in Zenitsu Agatsuma. Zenitsu Agatsuma also switched from the attack stance from before to a standing posture, and then also turned towards Kokushibo. At first glance at this posture, it was as if it was a one-on-one duel between Zenitsu Agatsuma and Kokushibo. Thunder breathing, first form, thunderclap and flash, sixfold. As Zenitsu Agatsuma muttered in his mouth, Zenitsu Agatsuma once again put on an attack stance, and at the same time, there were also many arcs of electricity flashing around him. Immediately afterwards, another lightning bolt flashed across the sky, as if it was responding to Zenitsu Agatsuma, or as if it was cheering for Zenitsu Agatsuma. The corners of Kokushibo's mouth could not help but curve up, and then he spat out 3 words, "Interesting." Inashuk also felt the change in Zenitsu Agatsuma's aura, and so he could not help but exclaim, "This guy, he really is a very powerful guy." Hattori Kyujo also naturally felt the extraordinariness of Zenitsu Agatsuma's aura at this time. It was an aura that was not inferior to that of a Hashira. It was also this time that Hattori Kyujo truly began to look at Zenitsu Agatsuma in a different light. "This kid." Uzui Tengen also muttered with some surprise. "Hattori, Zenitsu's attack is very fast, we have to grasp the timing of our entry well. We must not affect Zenitsu." Inashuk then reminded Hattori Kyujo again. Because the thunder breathing's moves were as fast as lightning, it was impossible for other breathing techniques to achieve such a fast attack, so coordinating with a thunder breathing user was also not an easy thing, because if they were not careful, they could easily disrupt the rhythm of the thunder breathing user. Hearing these words, Hattori nodded her head. Just at this time, Zenitsu Agatsuma's figure moved, instantly transforming into a flash of lightning, and swept towards Kokushibo. Uzui Tengen, Inashuk, and Hattori Kyujo, relying on their naked eyes, were completely unable to capture Zenitsu Agatsuma's movements. They could only see a yellow lightning bolt flashing. They had to rely on highly concentrated perception to capture the movements of Zenitsu Agatsuma when he drew his sword. If this move was used on Uzui Tengen, Inashuk, and Hattori Kyujo, Uzui Tengen would still be able to parry it. As for Hattori Kyujo, activating her technique could block Zenitsu Agatsuma's sword strikes 2 to 3 times, wanting to completely receive the sixfold. It was not very possible with Hattori Kyujo's current strength. Inashuk was even more out of the question. Inashuk's techniques were basically very simple and brainless ordinary techniques, and he was completely unable to block the sixfold in Zenitsu Agatsuma's state. If Zenitsu Agatsuma was not in the sleeping and open-eyed state, perhaps Inashuk and Hattori Kyujo would have had a chance to contend with Zenitsu Agatsuma. It should be known that Zenitsu Agatsuma, who was sleeping and open-eyed, could completely squeeze out his own strength, and release it twofold. And also this time it was rainy weather, the lightning factors in the air could even be drawn by Zenitsu Agatsuma, who occupied the celestial time, geographical advantages, and human harmony. It was not impossible for him to fight with Kokushibo. As the electric light flashed, Kokushibo still did not stand in place. He did not even have the intention to move his feet. Tier, $10 Casual Reader, 20 plus Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40 plus Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80 plus Advanced Chapter. 459, Chapter 459. As the electric light flashed, Zenitsu Agatsuma finally launched his first strike when he passed by Kokushibo's side. Kokushibo, under the transparent world, had also already discovered the signs that Zenitsu Agatsuma was about to launch an attack, and so he swung his sword to meet it. Zenitsu Agatsuma's blade instantly brushed against Kokushibo's demon sword, and immediately many arcs of electricity appeared around Kokushibo's body. And in the collision between the Nichiren blade and the demon sword, a large number of sparks also flew out, accompanied by bursts of metallic friction. The first strike missed, and Zenitsu Agatsuma's figure also flashed out like a lightning bolt, taking advantage of the momentum. Then the second strike, the third strike, and the fourth strike were also like this. But in the fifth strike, Kokushibo discovered that his entire body had actually appeared to have a sense of paralysis. The most intense sense of paralysis was naturally in his arms. In the fifth strike, Kokushibo almost lost control of his arms because of the sense of paralysis. In the end, Kokushibo forcibly stimulated his muscle cells to gain control of his arms, and at the last moment he blocked Zenitsu Agatsuma's fifth strike. It was also after blocking the fifth strike that Kokushibo discovered that his arms had completely stiffened. It was also at this time that Zenitsu Agatsuma's last strike arrived in quick succession, instantly sweeping past Kokushibo's neck. After the six-strike combo was completed, Zenitsu Agatsuma's figure stopped in place alongside Uzui Tengen. Zenitsu Agatsuma, who had regained his footing, could be seen with a stream of hot air rising from his body, and at the same time, he could also see the hot air that Zenitsu Agatsuma exhaled when he breathed. It seemed that Zenitsu Agatsuma was in a state where his body temperature was very high. Uzui Tengen, who was beside Zenitsu Agatsuma, then noticed that Zenitsu Agatsuma's eyes were extremely empty and lifeless. It seemed that this body was just an empty shell, and there was no soul present at all. Did he cut the neck? Uzui Tengen also asked himself uncertainly. Because Zenitsu Agatsuma's last two strikes were struck out in succession, Uzui Tengen was also not very certain whether Zenitsu Agatsuma had cut Kokushibo's neck. However, what surprised Uzui Tengen was, why had Kokushibo's movements suddenly stiffened? Heavenly Thunder Induction. Then, Zenitsu Agatsuma said these few words again in a murmur. Immediately, a muffled thunderbolt struck down towards Kokushibo from the sky. Kokushibo's hair was blown up all of a sudden, his whole body was emitting white smoke, and a layer of black stains appeared on his face. This heavenly thunder induction could not be triggered in just any situation, it could only be successfully triggered when thunderclap and flash, sixfold was released in rainy weather, and at the same time all six strikes hit the target. Because each strike would leave a thunder rhythm of a special frequency on the opponent's body, when the thunder rhythm accumulated to a certain amount, it would resonate with the lightning in the sky. This was also the reason why Kokushibo's body had a sense of paralysis in the fifth strike. After Zenitsu Agatsuma said heavenly thunder induction, Zenitsu Agatsuma suddenly lost consciousness, and fell to the ground. This turn of events made Uzui Tengen, Ina shook, and Hattori Kyujo somewhat at a loss. The first to react was Hattori Kyujo. It could be seen that Hattori Kyujo immediately rushed to Zenitsu Agatsuma's side, and then squatted down, straightening Zenitsu Agatsuma's figure, and checking Zenitsu Agatsuma's physical condition. Uzui Tengen then looked towards Zenitsu Agatsuma with some nervousness. Hattori Kyujo finished checking, and then said to Uzui Tengen, whose expression was nervous, he may have been too exhausted, and fainted from exhaustion. Tier, $10 Casual Reader, 20 plus Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40 plus Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80 plus Advanced Chapter. 460, Chapter 460. Having been struck directly by the heavenly thunder, Kokushibo was also slightly dazed, because this was the first time since Kokushibo was born that he had been struck by lightning. Kokushibo did not know that this thunder was actually triggered by Zenitsu Agatsuma. If he had known, it was estimated that he would have torn Zenitsu Agatsuma to pieces. And although this heavenly thunder would not be fatal to Kokushibo, it did damage most of the cells in Kokushibo's body. Of course, what Kokushibo truly could not let go of was Zenitsu Agatsuma's last strike of the sixth combo. If Zenitsu Agatsuma's strength was a little stronger, Kokushibo knew that that strike would definitely have cut off his neck. In the end, It was still that Zenitsu Agitsama's strength was not enough, which led to the last strike being unable to completely sever Kokushibo's neck. Although Zenitsu Agitsama did not sever Kokushibo's neck, he did indeed open a bloody gash on Kokushibo's neck. For Kokushibo, that was a disgrace to the upper rank one. In just a few seconds, Kokushibo then returned to his original state again. Kokushibo's expression also became gloomy, his 6 eyes carrying anger. It could be seen that Kokushibo reached out and grabbed his hair, and then pulled hard, tearing off a piece of his scalp. Kokushibo directly abandoned that head of hair and scalp that had been damaged by the electricity, and casually threw it on the ground. Then Kokushibo quickly grew new scalp and hair, apart from the clothes on his body appearing somewhat disheveled. Kokushibo had almost not been affected in any way. The angry Kokushibo, without saying a word, burst towards Zenitsu Agitsama, with an appearance as if he must kill Zenitsu Agitsama. Uzui Tengen, seeing Kokushibo charging towards Zenitsu Agitsama, then immediately instructed Hattori Kyujo, "Take Zenitsu away. This guy has a lot of potential, he cannot die here." From Zenitsu Agitsama's one round with Kokushibo just now, Uzui Tengen already knew that Zenitsu Agitsama would definitely be a pillar of the Demon Slayer Corps in the future. As soon as the words fell, Uzui Tengen then charged towards Kokushibo. Sound breathing, 6th form, unstable choir. Sound breathing, 6th form, unstable choir. The sound breathing user gathers power and uses their weapon to attack the ground. The ground within a radius of 30 meters in front of the caster will be subjected to strong vibrations and crack or collapse, thereby interfering with the enemy's actions. If the enemy leaps into the air, it can be coordinated with the 7th form, strong dragon pressure to use. It could be seen that Uzui Tengen swung the double swords in his hand, and slammed them onto the ground in front of him. Boom! Only the sound of a cracking sound like an earthquake was heard, and the surrounding ground then vibrated, as if there was an earthquake. Instantly, the bluestone on the ground cracked, and then a large pit collapsed out. Kokushibo, after feeling the situation under his feet, immediately leaped into the air, because if he sidestepped to other places, it would be equivalent to giving up the opportunity to attack. Uzui Tengen, seeing Kokushibo leaping into the air, then forcibly endured the pain in his left leg, bent his knees, and also leaped into the high sky. Sound breathing, 7th form, roar dragon pressure. Sound breathing, 7th form, roar dragon pressure. The sound breathing user leaps up from top to bottom, using the hilt of the sword to strike the enemy's head with a powerful attack. Under the hilt of the sword, an extremely strong pressure zone will form, forcibly suppressing the enemy. As Uzui Tengen descends, the pressure will also increase accordingly. Sure enough, when Kokushibo entered Uzui Tengen's pressure zone, his figure suddenly fell, and then he fell into the pit that Uzui Tengen had created just now. And Uzui Tengen's figure also went down with the momentum, pressing down directly. Tier, $10 casual reader, 20 plus advanced chapter. $20 intermediate reader, 40 plus advanced chapter. $40 expert reader, 80 plus advanced chapter. 461, chapter 461. Roar Dragon Pressure, as the name implies, is a suppression type skill. Only someone with a physique like Uzui Tengen could maximize the release of all the power of Roar Dragon Pressure. Hattori Kyujo, under Uzui Tengen's instructions, did not hesitate too much, and picked up Zenitsu Agitsama and retreated to a relatively safe place to observe the situation. Good opportunity. Inashuk, seeing that Kokushibo was being suppressed by Roar Dragon Pressure, then charged up. Beast Breathing, 4th Fong, Slice, and Dice. It could be seen that Inashuk also leaped up, and then swung 7 or 8 serrated sword auras towards Kokushibo, who was being pressed into the pit. Inashuk could feel that Uzui Tengen had created a pressure zone, so he did not choose to get close to Kokushibo, otherwise he would definitely be affected by the pressure, and might also be subjected to the range damage of strong dragon pressure. Therefore, Inashuk chose to launch some restraining attacks from a distance. And Kokushibo's entire person was forcibly pressed into the pit by the pressure of strong dragon pressure. As soon as Kokushibo's feet touched the ground in the pit, because they were subjected to the influence of strong pressure, the ground around his feet immediately cracked, and then collapsed again by a few centimeters, burying Kokushibo's feet into the ground. At the same time, Kokushibo's knees also had a slightly bent phenomenon, it seemed that he was trying his best to resist the strong pressure pressing on his body. At this time, it could be seen that Kokushibo's expression was already full of anger, and then Kokushibo was heard roaring, "Get out!" Moon breathing, 10th form, drilling slashes, moon through bamboo leaves. Moon breathing, 10th form, drilling slashes, moon through bamboo leaves. Kokushibo wields his evolved demon sword, and slashes out 2 revolving slashes. The 2 slashes will form giant crescent moon-shaped sword auras, and the sword auras are also attached with countless crescent moon blades. It could be seen that Kokushibo, bearing the heavy pressure, desperately wielded the already evolved demon sword, and swung revolving slashes towards Uzui Tengen and Inashuk in mid-air. Immediately 2 giant crescent moon-shaped purple sword auras pounced towards Uzui Tengen and Inashuk. The giant purple sword auras in the shape of a crescent moon were also carrying crescent moon blades. Almost all of the slashes that Kokushibo released using moon breathing would have these crescent moon blades. The 2 giant crescent moon-shaped sword auras instantly shattered the several serrated sword auras that Inashuk had swung out, and then their power did not decrease at all, but rather increased, and slashed towards Uzui Tengen and Inashuk. Although Uzui Tengen had already noticed the abnormality when Kokushibo released the technique, Uzui Tengen did not expect that Kokushibo would actually release a technique with such amazing destructive power. For this kind of technique, apart from dodging, there was completely no possibility of taking it head-on. However, it was difficult to change the position of his figure in mid-air. Inashuk, throw the sword over. Uzui Tengen then looked towards Inashuk, and then said to him. However, Uzui Tengen also did not know whether Inashuk could understand his words. After he finished speaking, Uzui Tengen then threw out several shuriken towards Inashuk. Inashuk did not understand Uzui Tengen's meaning for a time, until he blocked the shuriken with his sword, and his figure was pushed out by the impact. Inashuk immediately threw his Nichiren blade towards Uzui Tengen. Uzui Tengen then blocked with the blade. The impact force generated by Inashuk's Nichiren blade colliding with Uzui Tengen's blade surface also pushed Uzui Tengen out some distance. The entire process happened in the blink of an eye. As the 2 people borrowed force from each other to change their positions, Kokushibo's 2 giant crescent moon-shaped sword auras just happened to brush past in front of the 2 people. Tier, $10 Casual Reader, 20+ Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40+ Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80+ Advanced Chapter. 462, Chapter 462. Although Uzui Tengen and Inashuk cooperated with each other to change the position of their figures, this little distance did not allow them to completely avoid Kokushibo's attack. Uzui Tengen and Inashuk were both cut by the crescent moon blades that were carried in the sword aura, and at the same time their figures were also blown away by the sword aura. And those 2 giant sword auras, after injuring Uzui Tengen and Inashuk, continued to advance forward, and 2 very deep cracks appeared on the ground because of this. Wherever the sword aura went, not a single raindrop dared to approach, forming a very strange sight. In the end, those 2 giant sword auras instantly cut the archway of the Yoshiwara red light district into pieces, and in the end, they destroyed a shop near the archway before dissipating. Seeing this kind of posture, Hattori Kyujo was also greatly shocked. Was this the full strength of an upper-rank demon? After Uzui Tengen and Inashuk were blown away, they endured the pain and slowly stood up again. Because Inashuk was bare-chested, many bloodied cuts of varying depths could be seen on his body at this time, and fresh blood kept flowing out from the bloodied cuts. Even though the falling raindrops kept washing over them, they still could not completely dilute the fresh blood flowing from the bloodied cuts. From this point, it could be known how serious Inashuk's external injuries were. Uzui Tengen's situation was much more serious than Inashuk's, because Inashuk had been half a beat slow in throwing the sword over, so Uzui Tengen, in addition to his upper body, had been injured by the crescent moon blades. His legs and arms had also been injured by the crescent moon blades. It could be seen that the rainwater under Uzui Tengen was filled with some faint red. At this moment, Kokushibo jumped out of the pit. Kokushibo, after jumping out of the pit, did not pay attention to Uzui Tengen and Inashuk, but rather transferred his gaze to Hattori Kyujo, who was holding Zenitsu Agatsuma, at the first opportunity. Uzui Tengen also discovered that Kokushibo's gaze was not on himself and Inashuk, and so he followed Kokushibo's gaze and looked over, discovering that Kokushibo was looking at Hattori Kyujo. Uzui Tengen immediately understood, and then shouted loudly, "Run!" Being shouted at like this by Uzui Tengen, Hattori Kyujo then thought about retreating quickly, but before Hattori Kyujo could completely step her foot out, Kokushibo appeared in front of Hattori Kyujo like a ghost, and at the same time, a cold light flashed past Hattori Kyujo's eyes. Hattori Kyujo subconsciously closed her eyes, because she knew that death was a second away. Clang! Only the sound of a crisp metallic collision was heard, and Kokushibo's demon sword stopped close to Hattori Kyujo's neck. "Go!" A charming voice rang out from Hattori Kyujo's ear. Hattori Kyujo immediately opened her eyes, and then saw Shinobu Koko appear beside her at some point, and the tip of Shinobu Koko's Nichiren blade was just resting on Kokushibo's blade. Hattori Kyujo did not think too much, and immediately retreated a few steps, taking her neck away from Kokushibo's blade, and then leaped onto the roof of a shop, creating distance from Kokushibo. Kokushibo, seeing that a Ching Yaojin had appeared halfway, his eyes flashed coldly, and he immediately added force and pulled the demon sword hard. The demon sword then slashed towards Shinobu Koko with the momentum. Shinobu Koko's strength was originally not as good as Kokushibo's, so she was pushed back several steps by Kokushibo all of a sudden. Shinobu Koko could only use her left hand to support the back of the blade, and use the strength of both hands to contend with Kokushibo. Tier, $10 Casual Reader, 20+ Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40+ Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80+ Advanced Chapter. 463, Chapter 463. Bullying girls is not very manly. Just as Shinobu Koko and Kokushibo were confronting each other, a hearty voice then came out, and then a streak of fire flashed towards Kokushibo. Flame breathing, second form, rising scorching sun. Kokushibo immediately withdrew his strength, stopped suppressing Shinobu Koko, and then turned around to meet Kyojuro Rengoku. Immediately, Kokushibo and Kyojuro Rengoku's weapons collided with each other, because Kokushibo did not use a breathing technique, but rather just blocked and defended, and also Kyojuro Rengoku's attack was a thrust from bottom to top, so Kokushibo's figure was pushed back several steps by Kyojuro Rengoku all of a sudden. Because of Kyojuro Rengoku's intervention, Shinobu Koko was then able to break away from the unfavorable situation. As Kokushibo's figure retreated, Shinobu Koko seized this opportunity, and fiercely stabbed towards Kokushibo. Insect breathing, dance of the bee sting, true flutter. Insect breathing, dance of the bee sting, true flutter. A very powerful stab, the force is enough to penetrate the demon's skull. The target of Shinobu Koko's attack was precisely Kokushibo's head, but Kokushibo's reaction was extremely fast. When Shinobu Koko launched the attack, he stomped his foot hard to stabilize his figure, and then his body rotated 360 degrees, and at the same time dense vortex-shaped sword auras spread to the surroundings. The sword auras that were turning in a vortex also carried sharp crescent moon blades. Moon breathing, fifth form, moon spirit calamitous eddy. Kyojuro Rengoku had fought with Kokushibo before, so he knew some of Kokushibo's techniques. Seeing Kokushibo using moon spirit calamitous light, Kyojuro Rengoku grabbed Shinobu Koko's ankle, and then pulled her back, and at the same time, he immediately activated his defensive technique. Flame breathing, fourth form, blooming flame undulation. As the two forces collided, they immediately turned the surrounding area into an area that rainwater could not invade, those free-falling raindrops, as soon as they approached the surroundings of Kokushibo and Kyojuro Rengoku, were immediately bounced away and splashed to the surroundings. Shinobu Koko hid beside Kyojuro Rengoku, because it was the first time she had come into contact with Kokushibo, so she did not understand Kokushibo, and also did not know that Kokushibo was so powerful. If Kyojuro Rengoku had not pulled her back in time just now, then she would definitely have been injured by those dense sword auras and crescent moon blades. Because of the relationship with Shinobu Koko's body, the techniques that Shinobu Koko had mastered were not many. After all, insect breathing was a new breathing technique that she had derived from flower breathing based on her own situation, so the techniques that Shinobu Koko had developed were not many, and even more did not have techniques with a very wide range. Shinobu Koko's techniques were mainly based on stabbing, and then coordinating with poison that could kill demons to kill the target, so Shinobu Koko did not have any defensive techniques. However, Shinobu Koko's poison had not been tested on upper-rank demons, so Shinobu Koko did not know whether the existing poison could work on upper-rank demons. If the poison did not work, then Shinobu Koko would lose 90% of her combat power, because Shinobu Koko was the only person who could not cut off a demon's neck. Uzui Tengen, seeing Shinobu Koko and Kyojuro Rengoku, who had come to provide support, his taut heart could not help but relax. The situation had finally turned to his side this time. And just as Kyojuro Rengoku and Kokushibo were exchanging blows, Shinobu Koko took the opportunity to slip to Uzui Tengen's side, and then asked, "Uzui, are you alright?" Tier, $10 Casual Reader, 20+ Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40+ Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80+ Advanced Chapter. 464, Chapter 464. Uzui Tengen shook his head, and then said, "I'm fine. I still have the ability to fight." Apart from the knee injury, those dense bloodied cuts on his body would not affect Uzui Tengen in the short term. After all, the blood had already been stopped by Uzui Tengen through breathing. However, once he engaged in fierce combat again, these wounds would definitely bleed again. Therefore, a war of attrition would definitely reduce Uzui Tengen's combat power. This was still on the premise of ensuring that he would not be injured again. If he was injured again, then the situation would be hard to say. Where are Ryaji and Tanjiro? Why are they not here? Shinobu Koko then asked the question that she was most concerned about. Ryaji and Tanjiro went to save my wives. The situation cannot be explained in a few words. Anyway, we were forced to separate. It is estimated that their side is also just as dangerous. Uzui Tengen answered very simply. Just as Shinobu Koko and Uzui Tengen were talking, a burst of energy explosion sounds rang out. Shinobu Koko and Uzui Tengen immediately turned their heads and looked over, and then they saw Kyojuro Rengoku's figure flying backwards. The battle between the two still ended with Kyojuro Rengoku's defeat. This showed that in a one-on-one situation, the Hashira of the Demon Slayer Corps could not defeat Kokushibo, who was the upper rank one. After defeating Kyojuro Rengoku, Kokushibo also stopped his technique and stood still. This kind of situation made Shinobu Koko's expression become solemn, and at the same time, it also made Shinobu Koko know the fundamental reason why Kyojuro Rengoku had not been injured last time. It was very clear that the last time on the Infinity Train, it must have been because of Ryaji that Kyojuro Rengoku had not been injured. Otherwise, Kyojuro Rengoku would not have fallen into a disadvantage with just one exchange. Uzui Tengen also saw this point as well. Uzui Tengen originally thought that the last time on the Infinity Train, it was because of Kyojuro Rengoku that Ryaji's group had been able to escape from danger, but now the fact that Kyojuro Rengoku was no match for Kokushibo completely overturned this inference. Clearly, the last time on the Infinity Train, Ryaji was the key core. Shinobu Koko quickly looked towards Inashuk again, and then instructed, "Inashuk, you cannot help here, go find Ryaji, perhaps you can help there." Hearing these words, Inashuk also knew in his heart that it was difficult to be of use in this kind of level of battle, and so he shouted towards Hattori Kyujo in the distance, "Hattori, we are going to support white-haired bro." After he finished speaking, Inashuk did not wait, and directly turned his head and ran away. When evacuating from this war zone where Kokushibo was located, Inashuk also took the opportunity to pick up the Nichiren blade that he had thrown out. Hattori Kyujo, hearing Inashuk's words, did not have any hesitation, and then picked up Zenitsu Agatsuma and set off to chase after him. Because Hattori Kyujo also knew that there were already 3 Hashira working together to deal with him here, staying here, she would at most be watching the show. As such, it was better to go support Ryaji and Tanjiro, because Ryaji and Tanjiro were only 2 people. The situation that they had to face was estimated to be much more dangerous than the situation here. Just as Hattori Kyujo had just made a move, Kokushibo immediately also made a move. It seemed that he was unwilling to let Hattori Kyujo leave. Uzui Tengen, seeing this situation, immediately also made a move. His entire person then burst out like a bullet. The place where Uzui Tengen had stood before was cracked by the extremely powerful sonic boom, and the surrounding air all shook along with it. Sound breathing, third form, sonic boom flurry. Sound breathing, third form, sonic boom flurry. This technique is similar to thunder breathing, first form, thunderclap and flash. They are both flash attacks launched with high-speed movement, but the speed is not as fast as Thunder Breathing, First Form, Thunderclap and Flash. Uzui Tengen, with the help of the Sonic Boom Flurry, did not launch an attack on Kokushibo when he approached Kokushibo, but rather took the opportunity to throw a lit explosive towards Kokushibo, blowing Kokushibo away. And Uzui Tengen then used the high-speed movement of the Sonic Boom Flurry to leave the range of the explosion before the explosion. Hattori Kyujo, seeing this situation, was even more afraid to continue to stay, and seized the opportunity to run towards the direction of the mountains and forests. Tier $10 Casual Reader, 20+ Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40+ Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80+ Advanced Chapter. 465, Chapter 465. Ryaji and Tanjiro, who had followed Akeza and entered deep into the mountains and forests, did not know that Uzui Tengen's group had encountered Kokushibo's interception. Ryaji was still maintaining a special footstep sound as he moved forward. And what Ryaji was even more unaware of was that Muzan Kibutsuji was not targeting himself this time, but rather Tanjiro. Akeza's mission was just to restrain Ryaji, and give the upper rank 6, Daki the opportunity to kill Tanjiro. Arranging for an upper rank to deal with Tanjiro, this was enough to show Muzan Kibutsuji's determination to kill Tanjiro this time. Because after the Infinity Train, through the cell images transmitted back by the lower rank 1, who had died in battle, Muzan Kibutsuji discovered that Tanjiro was not a very awesome demon hunter, and so Muzan Kibutsuji greatly regretted that he had not personally resolved Tanjiro when he was in Asakusa, Tokyo Prefecture. And the reason why Muzan Kibutsuji did not personally take action to take the opportunity to resolve Tanjiro when he discovered Ryaji and Tanjiro in the Red Light District was because there was also Uzui Tengen beside Tanjiro, and Ryaji was also near the Kyogoku house. Uzui Tengen was not the main reason that Muzan Kibutsuji was concerned about. The reason why Muzan Kibutsuji chose to do nothing at that time was more because of Ryaji. Ryaji made Muzan Kibutsuji think of the person who had almost killed him in the past, Kokushibo's younger brother, Yoriaki Tsujikuni. The last time on the Infinity Train, Ryaji and Kokushibo had fought evenly, which made Muzan Kibutsuji have to start to be somewhat wary of Ryaji. Although the battle ended with Ryaji taking the initiative to retreat, if the battle had continued, then it would not have been far from dawn, and the situation would definitely have turned to Ryaji's side. So, from a certain point of view, it was Ryaji who had given Kokushibo and Akeza a chance to live, because Ryaji clearly still had some reservations. Even if Muzan Kibutsuji was not afraid of Uzui Tengen, it would also take some effort to kill Tanjiro in front of Uzui Tengen. And Ryaji would definitely take advantage of this effort to arrive. As such, the situation was hard to say. Another point was that Muzan Kibutsuji did not know how many people Ryaji had brought. If there were more than 3 Hashira present, and they coordinated with Ryaji, what Muzan Kibutsuji feared was that Ryaji could drag the battle to dawn. Therefore, Muzan Kibutsuji, from the time he discovered that Ryaji was monitoring him, did not think about showing his cards, and Muzan Kibutsuji then used the hostages in Daki's hands to set up such a scheme. A scheme that seemed to be targeting Ryaji and Tanjiro. In reality, it was only targeting others besides Ryaji. As the saying goes, pick the soft persimmons to pinch. In reality, Muzan Kibutsuji had also thought that if he really could not deal with Ryaji, then he would just wear him down, wearing him down until Ryaji grew old or died of old age. Anyway, Muzan Kibutsuji, as a demon, had an infinitely long life, so he did not have to worry about not being able to afford to wear him down. In addition to wearing Ryaji down, Muzan Kibutsuji had also thought about winning him over. After all, the powerful Kokushibo had been won over by him in the past. So, this was also why Daki and Akeza had had the behavior of winning Ryaji over from the beginning. From this point, it could also be seen that Muzan Kibutsuji was very unwilling to fight with Ryaji. As time passed, Ryaji and Tanjiro followed Akeza to the edge of a cliff. From afar, Ryaji saw that there were 2 women standing on the edge of the cliff. One of them was very enchanting, with a head of silver white hair, and had a slight difference in hair color from Ryaji's white hair. Tier $10 Casual Reader, 20+ Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40+ Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80+ Advanced Chapter. 466, Chapter 466. It was very clear that this enchanting woman should be the upper rank 6, Daki, without a doubt. The other one was a woman who was tied up with ropes, and looked quite pure. She should be Uzui Tenjin's other wife. Before long, Ryaji and Tanjiro, along with Akaza, then also arrived at the edge of the cliff. Ryaji looked around, and a smile could not help but appear on his face. Choosing such a place, it was clear that they were not giving him a chance to save people at all. Because the geology on the edge of the cliff was not thick, and was very brittle, with Akaza's destructive power, it was estimated that as long as he struck the ground once with a heavy blow, the place where Ryaji was standing now would collapse, and everyone would fall off the cliff together. Akaza and Daki completely did not have to worry about life problems, because as demons, they would definitely not die from falling. Under normal circumstances, when encountering this kind of situation, if Ryaji chose to save people, he would fall off the cliff along with the hostages. If he chose to evacuate to a safe place when the mountain collapsed, then he would lose the opportunity to save people. It had to be said that Akaza and Daki were really smart. They had chosen such a place to torment people's mentality. However, Ryaji still had a way to deal with this kind of situation. However, Ryaji also did not know what they would do. Perhaps they would choose to directly kill the hostages, it was not certain. So, Ryaji still planned to wait and see what happened, and see how Akaza and Daki planned to play this game. After seeing Ryaji, Daki then kept looking at Ryaji, as if she had taken a fancy to Ryaji. Ryaji, seeing Daki staring straight at him like a female cat in heat, could not help but say, "Is Muzan Kibutsuji not good in that area? It has only been 2 days. And you are already lonely again." Akaza was completely uninterested in this kind of topic, and the expression on his face did not have the slightest change. And Daki did not dare to say anything bad about Muzan Kibutsuji, and so she retorted, "I wonder who it was who was hiding on the roof eavesdropping that day. I think the one who is unbearably lonely is you. If you really want my body, it's not like I won't give it to you. As long as you join us, I will naturally be yours. This is the Lord's intention. We are very sincere." Daki was also making a final attempting to persuade Ryaji. Tanjiro, who was on the side, hearing Daki bewitching Ryaji with her seductive words, then immediately reminded him, "Ryaji-senpai, do not listen to the nonsense of this enchantress." Ryaji then patted Tanjiro's shoulder, and then said, "Don't be nervous." After he finished speaking, Ryaji looked towards Daki, and then said, "I said before, if I really want to get you, I can do it at any time, even if you are now in Muzan Kibutsuji's hands, I can snatch you away. But unfortunately, I am not interested in you." Ryaji then changed the topic. Akaza did not refute, because Akaza had come into contact with Ryaji, so Akaza had a measure of Ryaji's strength in his heart. Ryaji's last gaze and words made Daki feel somewhat frustrated. How could she be a well-known courtesan in the Yoshiwara red light district, the woman that countless men dreamed of, and in the end, she was actually loathed by Ryaji? Let's talk about serious matters. Are you going to take the initiative to release the person, or do I have to take action myself? Ryaji then pulled the topic back to the main topic. Tier, $10 casual reader, 20 plus advanced chapter. $20 intermediate reader, 40 plus advanced chapter. $40 expert reader, 80 plus advanced chapter. 467, chapter 467. You want to save people. Alright. It just depends on whether you dare to save them. Akaza said, and immediately grabbed Makio, and then suspended her entire person outside the cliff. As long as Akaza let go, Makio would fall off the cliff. However, Makio did not have the slightest fear, because after being exposed and controlled by Daki, she had already prepared herself for death. "Don't worry about me. Kill him, and my death will be worthwhile," Makio said, looking at Ryaji. Ryaji did not make any reply, nor did he make any movements, but rather kept looking at Suma, trying to convey some information to Suma with his eyes. "However, there are still conditions. This person has to be saved by that kid. As for you, it is best to just obediently watch from the side. Otherwise, I will kill the other person." Akaza then pointed to Tanjiro with his other hand, and then said. Hearing these words, Ryaji smiled. This was clearly letting Tanjiro take the initiative to jump off the cliff. With this, Ryaji also noticed Akaza's true purpose this time. The one they wanted to kill the most was Tanjiro, not himself. Although Ryaji also knew that they also wanted him to die very much, they were not sure about him, and were afraid that jumping off the cliff would not be enough to make him die. Ryaji looked at Tanjiro, and did not know whether Tanjiro had the courage to do this. Tanjiro, seeing Ryaji's gaze looking over, then took a deep breath and said, "No problem." As he said this, he then stood out. Akaza no longer talked nonsense, and stared at Ryaji intently and began to count down, 3, 2, 1. When he counted to 1, Akaza did not let go with the momentum, but rather threw Makio outwards, completely not giving Makio any chance to stick to the cliff wall. Because if she stuck to the cliff wall, she might be able to grab the vegetation growing on the cliff wall. Although Makio's hands and feet were tied with ropes, Akaza was still very cautious, and did not give Makio and Tanjiro any chance to survive. At the same time, Tanjiro also rushed out, and then leaped, grabbing Makio. But because the two people were already in mid-air, their figures were affected by gravity, and began to fall. Akaza also revealed a smug smile at this moment, but the smile that Akaza had just revealed then froze, and then Akaza shouted loudly, "Do it." The reason why Akaza's smile suddenly froze was because Ryaji had activated the demon god transformation when Tanjiro went to save the person. So when Akaza saw the change in Ryaji's form, his heart then rose up, because Ryaji had suppressed Kokushibo with this form back then. But just as Akaza opened his mouth, Daki was preparing to deal a deadly blow to Suma, but Daki discovered that her body seemed to be frozen, and she could not make any movements at all. "My body can't move," Daki then said with some panic. At the same time, Akaza also discovered that his body was indeed being imprisoned by a force. Before Akaza could figure it out, Ryaji then transformed into a black shadow, snatched away Suma, and then jumped off the cliff while holding her. Akaza and Daki were both stunned. Ryaji actually took the initiative to jump off the cliff. Could it be that he was going to his death? But this idea was quickly rejected by Akaza. Ryaji was very strange, since he dared to jump off the cliff, he naturally had a way to escape. Before long, the imprisoning force disappeared, and Akaza then stood on the edge of the cliff and looked down. Tier, $10 Casual Reader, 20 plus Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40 plus Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80 plus Advanced Chapter. 468, Chapter 468. The reason why Daki and Akaza could not move just now was because Ryaji had immediately used telekinetic control after activating the demon god transformation. In a situation where Daki and Akaza were unaware, it could indeed successfully freeze them, but if Akaza and Daki forcibly broke free, Ryaji would not have any way to stop them. Because with the C-grade demon god devourer state, it was no longer possible to completely suppress them when dealing with upper-rank demons. So, telekinetic control could only barely restrain Akaza and Daki's actions. However, even if Akaza and Daki had discovered that they could break free at the first opportunity, Ryaji would still be able to save Suma in a very short time. "Should we jump down and follow them?" Daki could not help but ask Akaza. "Jump." Akaza, who was vaguely uneasy in his heart, said, and then also leaped down. Daki then raised her arm, and then immediately shot a long sash out of her sleeve. This sash had grown out of Daki's body, and needed to be maintained by blood demon art. It was also Daki's weapon. Because it could be separated from the main body, it was also Daki's clone. Usually, Daki relied on these sashes to hunt humans in the red light district. The humans that were hunted would be packed into the space inside the sash, and then taken back to the storage point for storage, waiting to be eaten when there was a need. Makio and Suma had been exposed because of these sashes of Daki, because Daki only ate young and beautiful girls, so in addition to the Kigoku house, where she was located, the other two courtesan shops, Tokaido House and Ajimoto House, were also Daki's cafeterias for finding food. And also Daki could differentiate into many sashes, so it could be said that the red light district was under Daki's control. The sash shot out, and then tightly wrapped around a tree trunk near the cliff. Compared to jumping down directly, Daki still wanted to elegantly use the sash to rappel down. Even if she did not die from the fall, her body would definitely be greatly impacted. Of course, it was not that Daki was afraid of pain. In the end, Daki just did not want to jump directly. There were not many reasons. Akaza did not care, so he jumped down very decisively. And Ryaji was tightly hugging Suma with one hand. the comfort of the woman's body was naturally needless to say, it was very soft, and the feel was very good. However, Ryaji was not concerned about these things at this time. Ryaji's attention was all on Tanjiro, who was falling. Because Tanjiro had fallen earlier than Ryaji, so Ryaji and Tanjiro had a distance of about 20 to 30 meters. And the cliff was very high, it was estimated to be 400 meters high. And also because Suma was tied up, she could not take the initiative to hug him tightly, therefore Ryaji could not free up both hands, and only one hand could move freely. Ryaji, who had long expected this kind of situation, stretched out the hand that could move, and aimed at Tanjiro, who was falling. Then Ryaji, like Spider-Man, shot out a thick spider silk. The spider silk flew extremely fast, and came to Tanjiro's side in the blink of an eye, and then as it approached Tanjiro, the front end of the spider silk exploded all of a sudden, and a giant spider web then enveloped Tanjiro and also Makio, who was being tightly grabbed by Tanjiro. Then, Ryaji adjusted the angle of the palm of the hand that was hugging Suma, so that the palm faced the cliff walls on both sides. Immediately, Ryaji fired several more strands of spider silk in succession. The adhesion of the spider silk was very good, and it stuck firmly to the cliff wall all of a sudden. Tier, $10 Casual Reader, 20 plus Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40 plus Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80 plus Advanced Chapter. 469, Chapter 469. It could be said that, Spider Silk Control, the skill obtained from the lower rank 5, Rue, played a very good role at this critical moment. When he had just obtained this skill, Ryaji had felt that it was a rather useless skill, but he discovered that it was a very practical skill. Because Ryaji used spider silk to create many fulcrums on the cliff wall, as soon as the fulcrums were created, the spider web, affected by gravity, then tightened. The acceleration of gravity almost instantly became zero. According to the law of conservation of energy, this gravity was definitely not disappearing, but rather was being released through another form. The gravity was transformed through the spider web into an extremely terrifying inertial pulling force, which tightly pulled Ryaji's arm. If it was an ordinary person, it was estimated that their arm would really be broken off. Fortunately, Ryaji was now in the state of demon god transformation, and the strength of his body was naturally needless to say, he could completely withstand it. Fortunately, Ryaji's spider silk also had enough toughness and strength, otherwise even if Ryaji could pull it, if the spider silk broke, then it would all be for nothing. And throughout the entire process, Suma, who was in Ryaji's arms, had long been frightened, and kept screaming in Ryaji's ear. Not long after Ryaji had stabilized the situation, Akaza, who had followed and jumped down, had a face-to-face meeting with Ryaji, his eyes filled with anger. And Daki, who was behind Akaza, naturally also saw the situation just now, so as Akaza continued to fall, Daki immediately shot a sash towards Akaza. The sash then tightly wrapped around Akaza's ankle, and then Daki stopped the extension of the sash, and immediately stopped falling. Akaza's figure also stopped along with her. Akaza, after stopping, first used his hand to grab Daki's sash, and then readjusted his posture, changing the original head-down posture into a head-up posture. Akaza, after readjusting his posture, immediately shook off the sash wrapped around his ankle. Then Akaza grabbed Daki's sash and swung it. It seemed that he wanted to swing somewhere. Ryaji naturally noticed Akaza's actions. Without even having to think about it, Akaza definitely wanted to take advantage of the fact that he could not free his hands now to resolve Tanjiro, who was wrapped in the spider web. Ryaji, seeing Akaza's intention, immediately retrieved the spider silk, pulling Tanjiro up. The speed at which the spider silk was retrieved was extremely fast. Just as Akaza was about to approach and grab the spider silk that was holding Tanjiro and Makio, the spider silk had already been retrieved by Ryaji. Tanjiro and Makio, who were wrapped in the spider web, were then lifted up in Ryaji's hand, and also Ryaji's other hand was still tightly hugging Suma's waist, so Ryaji was now completely unable to free his hands to do other things. Although Akaza did not succeed, Daki did not stand idly by. While Ryaji was unable to free his hands, many sashes burst out from her back and shot towards Ryaji. Under Daki's control, those sashes became unusually sharp, but stabbing them on Ryaji's demon god transformation body had no effect at all, but rather cut off the spider silk that Ryaji was using to stabilize his figure. Ryaji's figure then began to fall again. Because he could not free his hands, Ryaji had no choice but to use his powerful telekinesis to hold his figure in place. In the end, Ryaji hugged Suma with one hand, and lifted Tanjiro and Makio, who were wrapped in the spider web, with the other hand, and then plunged into the cliff wall. Because he had telekinesis as support, Ryaji ran as if he was walking on flat ground in the air. Tier, $10 Casual Reader, 20 plus Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40 plus Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80 plus Advanced Chapter. 470, Chapter 470. Ryaji, using the two skills, telekinetic control and stealth, temporarily got rid of Akaza and Daki's entanglement. Seeing Ryaji just merge into the cliff wall like that, Akaza felt both helplessness and anger in his heart. Ryaji had used this trick to run away last time as well. What Akaza could not accept the most was that Ryaji actually ran in the air. Was this still a human? Damn it! It's like this again. Akaza cursed. The very annoyed Akaza, not believing in this evil, then swung to the other side of the cliff with the sash, and then used the force of his feet to kick off. His entire person then ejected towards that side of the cliff like a cannonball, and in the end, he launched a technique with unparalleled power and destructive force at the position where Ryaji had disappeared. Annihilation type, Meshaki. Only a loud noise was heard, and Akaza punched that area. Immediately the entire mountain shook, and large and small pieces of gravel splashed out, and smoke and dust rose. Akaza directly opened a 10-meter deep hole in that area, and Akaza was standing in that hole, sensing the surrounding aura. Daki was still immersed in the shock that Ryaji had brought her. If Ryaji had turned into a monster that could spit spider silk, Daki could also accept it. But running in mid-air, and running into the cliff, this was very unusual. Could it be that Ryaji was also a demon? But the aura was not. But what Ryaji had displayed seemed to be supernatural powers that only demons could possess. No longer thinking too much, Daki then quickly swung into the cave that Akaza had made. Akazadano, did they run away? Daki could not help but ask. If that was the case, then this operation could be said to be a complete failure. No, they just hid in the stone wall. Akaza replied. After he finished speaking, Akaza then activated his compass needle to strengthen his perception of the aura. Immediately, a snowflake-shaped pattern appeared under Akaza's feet. Afterwards, Akaza then looked down at his feet, and then said, "Below." As the voice rang out, Akaza then punched again. Akaza, like a pangolin digging a hole, followed Ryaji's scent, and frantically destroyed the inside of this mountain. Daki did not dare to pay too much attention, and could only silently watch from the side. And Ryaji, who had infiltrated the mountain, naturally sensed the movements outside. Because of Akaza's attack, Ryaji could feel a very urgent water surface hitting him behind him. If Ryaji stayed in place, he would really be forced out by Akaza. Just like Tanjiro had looked for the water demon before, he could sense the location of the water demon through his aura. Even if the water demon was hidden in the ground or in a building, he could also force it out through attacks. And using the stealth skill would definitely consume demon god power, so the consumption of demon god power would volatilize a unique scent. It was not too surprising that Akaza could sense Ryaji's scent through this. As for why Akaza and Kokushibo had not used this method to track Ryaji last time, the biggest reason was time, and secondly, they were not sure that they could kill Ryaji at that time. The reason why Akaza was chasing so closely this time was naturally because he did not dare to return without success again, otherwise it would be difficult to explain to Muzan Kibutsuji. Last time, because he had Kokushibo with him, Muzan Kibutsuji did not pursue it too much, but this time, it was different. Tier, $10 Casual Reader, 20 plus Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40 plus Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80 plus Advanced Chapter. 471, Chapter 471. It could be said that in Akaza's life as a demon, Ryaji was the most unsolvable and most difficult enemy that Akaza felt, and also the existence that Akaza could not forget in his entire life. Akaza, who was frantically bombarding the mountain, felt somewhat regretful in his heart at this time. If he had known this, he should have kicked this task to those guys who were making sarcastic remarks. Ryaji, hugging Suma, and also dragging Tanjiro and Makio, so the speed at which he moved in the stealth space was naturally limited to a certain extent. But Ryaji's speed was still not slow. if he did not have these burdens, Ryaji would have run away long ago, and Akeza would not even have a chance to track him. And in order to consider the feelings of Tanjiro and Uzui Tenjin's two wives, Ryaji was submerging at his fastest speed, for the sake of being able to get closer to the ground. And during this process, Suma, who was in Ryaji's arms, then had a choking situation. It was very clear that the oxygen in her lungs had run out. Ryaji also did not stay any longer, and immediately reversed direction, swimming towards the outside of the cliff. With the sound of water breaking, Ryaji, hugging Suma, then returned from the mountain to the air-filled world on the ground again. As soon as she returned from the stealth space to the world on the ground, Suma then coughed violently, and at the same time, her brain was somewhat unable to process the large amount of information that she was receiving. At this time, Suma did not even know whether she was really escaping for her life, or whether she was having a nightmare. Everything was somewhat too dreamlike. And the place where Ryaji came out was still a distance from the ground. Ryaji looked down, and it was about 30 meters from the ground. Ryaji went down with the momentum, and fell towards the ground. At the same time, the cliff wall where Ryaji had come out of just now suddenly exploded, and pieces of rubble splashed. It was Akeza who had chased out and caused it. And because Akeza was destroying it frantically, which had already made the cliff wall very unstable, this strike completely destroyed the stability of the mountain's maintenance, and the cliff wall collapsed all of a sudden. Akeza and Daki both knew that if they continued to stay in the cave, they would definitely be buried alive, so they all leaped out of the cave. And just as they leaped out of the cave, the huge rocks that were falling from the sky just happened to smash on Akeza and Daki's heads. If ordinary people were smashed by this, it was estimated that they would die on the spot. Even if they did not die, they would most likely become a fool, or a vegetable. But for demons, especially upper-rank demons, this kind of blow was nothing at all. Although their heads were smashed by the rocks, it was also because of this that Akeza and Daki's falling speed became even faster. Seeing that he was getting closer and closer to Ryaji, Akeza became even more excited. "Stop him. We can't let him submerge into the ground again." Akeza then ordered Daki. Because Akeza was ranked third among the upper ranks, and Daki was the last one among the upper ranks, so according to the hierarchy, Akeza's status was much higher than Daki's. Therefore, there was no problem with Akeza giving orders to Daki. Hearing these words, Daki did not have any hesitation, and many sashes burst out from her back and shot towards Ryaji. And Ryaji naturally also sensed the situation behind him. At the critical moment, Ryaji's body then began to melt, and then turned into a fluid form. This skill was a mission reward that the system had given Ryaji, but Ryaji felt that this should be a demon god transformation skill that the system had transported and upgraded from the lower rank 4. The skill name was Mimicry, which meant that Ryaji's body could simulate any form, turning into trees, or rocks like that. Tier, $10 Casual Reader, 20 plus Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40 plus Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80 plus Advanced Chapter. 472, Chapter 472. If there was a need, he could also partially mimic his limbs, for example, turning his hand into a knife, or a hammer or something, or turning his feet into thrusters like that. After Ryaji obtained this skill, although he had also researched it, he had not used it in actual combat. After all, Ryaji had few opportunities to activate the demon god transformation in the first place. That was, he used it more frequently after facing upper-rank demons. The most important point was that mimicry was a skill that extremely imitated demon god power. It was the most consuming skill among all skills, followed by stealth. So Ryaji rarely used mimicry, was also out of excessive consumption, and it was not certain that it could bring good results. And this time, Ryaji then mimicked his body into the form of a slime. The most important thing to do this was naturally to protect Tanjiro and Uzui Tenjin's two wives, because they would soon land, and without any cushioning, it was estimated that Tanjiro and them would be seriously injured even if they did not die. The second thing was to resolve the entanglement of Daki's sashes. In this form, even if Daki's sashes touched Ryaji, Ryaji could arbitrarily change his form to get rid of the shackles of the sashes, or swallow the sashes into his body, so that Daki's sashes would not play any role. Before long, Tanjiro, Makio, and Suma had already been wrapped into Ryaji's slime-like body, and Daki's sashes had also touched Ryaji, but those sashes could not entangle Ryaji at all. Ryaji slipped out of the sashes in the slime state all of a sudden. Daki's expression also showed astonishment, for Ryaji, even if Daki had not personally come into contact with him, but through Muzan Kibutsuji's cell sharing, Daki still had an understanding of Ryaji, which was the battle that Akaza and Kokushibo had conducted with Ryaji before. But this time, Ryaji had used a strange ability that he had not displayed before. This made Daki unable to help but feel somewhat afraid. If this was still not all of Ryaji, then how terrible was Ryaji? Akaza's expression also had a trace of change. Ryaji's ability undoubtedly refreshed Akaza's understanding. And in the next second, Ryaji's soft body, which had been mimicked into a slime, then smashed onto the ground, and Ryaji's body was also affected by the huge impact force, and a change in shape occurred. From an approximately spherical shape, it was squeezed into the shape of a rugby ball by the impact force. Tanjiro, Makio, and Suma, who were wrapped inside, were not affected by the impact force. And also as Ryaji absorbed most of the impact, he immediately activated Stealth, and then Ryaji, with Tanjiro and Uzui Tenjin's two wives, submerged into the ground. Just as Ryaji submerged into the ground, Akaza and Daki also heavily smashed onto the ground, smashing a large pit out of the relatively soft mud that was stained with rainwater. Before Akaza and Daki could have any respite, the huge rocks that had collapsed directly fell on their bodies. Some of them fell on the ground, and then were smashed into several pieces. The surroundings were immediately filled with a loud noise that was extremely loud, and the ground was shaken by the boulders that had fallen. Because it was raining heavily, the rocks were all wet, and the humidity around them was extremely high, so no smoke and dust were stirred up. And Ryaji, because he had hidden in the ground, escaped a disaster. After this movement ended, apart from the sound of rain, it was unusually quiet. There was no movement from Akaza and Daki in the pile of rocks for the time being. After the movement completely disappeared, Ryaji then floated out from the ground that had not been pressed by the boulders. At the same time, he also released Tanjiro and Uzui Tenjin's two wives from his body. Tier, $10 Casual Reader, 20+ Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40+ Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80+ Advanced Chapter. 473, Chapter 473. Because when Ryaji mimicked into a slime state, and swallowed Tanjiro, Makio, and Suma into his body, he formed a cavity area inside, so the few of them were not suffocated. After Ryaji released them from his body, he immediately cancelled the mimicry state, and then his body quickly turned back into the human form of the demon god transformation. And at this time, Suma's eyes were empty, as if she had lost her soul. It was clear that she had not recovered from what had happened just now. Ryaji did not intend to talk to her, but rather immediately tore off the ropes that were tied to her body, allowing her to regain her self-mobility. After doing these things, Ryaji did not stop his actions, but rather immediately squatted in front of the spider cocoon formed by the spider web that was wrapping Tanjiro and Makio, and then tore the spider cocoon open with his hand. Tanjiro and Makio were not in any serious trouble in the spider cocoon, because they were in the spider web, so Tanjiro and Makio were not very clear about what had happened specifically outside. And also the spider web had good sealing properties, so when he was stealthing, the water flow in the stealth space did not invade the spider cocoon, so Tanjiro and Makio did not have a situation where they could not hold their breath and choked on water. Tanjiro did not have too much fear for Ryaji after the demon god transformation, because Ryaji in Tanjiro's mind was like an older brother or even comparable to his father. If there was no Ryaji, Tanjiro did not know what his life would be like. So no matter how ugly or terrifying Ryaji's appearance became, Tanjiro would always have an inexplicable sense of intimacy towards Ryaji. On the contrary, Makio, seeing Ryaji after the demon god transformation at such a close distance, her expression then became frightened, and at the same time, she mistakenly thought that Ryaji was a demon. Because Makio had already prepared herself for death when she was thrown off the cliff by Akaza. As for all the things that had happened just now, Makio was extremely puzzled. Seeing Makio tightly grabbing his arm, with an unusually frightened appearance, Tanjiro then immediately explained, "Don't be afraid, Oni-san. This is Ryaji-senpai's demon god transformation." Just as Tanjiro's voice fell, Ryaji also cancelled the state of demon god transformation. In the process of saving people just now, Ryaji had consumed a lot of demon god power. If Ryaji continued to fight Akeza in the state of demon god transformation, he should only be able to maintain it for about 10 minutes. So Ryaji did not intend to continue to use demon god transformation to fight Akeza, because Ryaji planned to save some strength to deal with emergencies. If he used up all his strength at the beginning, then when he needed to exert strength, he would not have any strength to exert. So, it was a taboo to use up all of your strength before the battle had entered a fever pitch. Makio, seeing Ryaji's demon god transformation gradually turn into the appearance of a handsome young man, her frightened expression then became dumbfounded. Ryaji did not explain too much, but rather said to Tanjiro, "Let's go. Let's go and join up with Uzui Tengen and them first." Hearing these words, Tanjiro did not have any objections. With 2 rescued hostages, it was indeed not suitable to continue to entangle with Akeza and Daki. After he finished speaking, Ryaji immediately picked up Suma, and then quickly led the way in front. After being picked up, Suma subconsciously hooked Ryaji's neck. The reason why Ryaji would pick up Suma was naturally not to take advantage of Uzui Tengen's wife, but rather he felt that holding her would be faster. Tier, $10 Casual Reader, 20+ Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40+ Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80+ Advanced Chapter. 474, Chapter 474. Of course, it was not that Ryaji would run faster than usual when he was holding a beautiful woman, but rather Ryaji believed that Suma's speed of running on her own was not as fast as him running while holding her. The most important thing was naturally to get rid of Akeza and Daki's pursuit. Ryaji did not think that Suma's speed of action could be faster than 2 upper-rank demons. As for why Ryaji did not pick up Makio as well, it was because holding 2 people would greatly affect Ryaji's ability to deal with emergencies. Tanjiro, seeing Ryaji pick up Suma and run away, could not help but look at Makio on the other side. It seemed that he was using his eyes to ask whether she also needed him to hold her like Ryaji. Tanjiro was naturally impossible to say such words directly, so he could only use his eyes to probe. Makio, seeing Tanjiro looking at her, then immediately understood what he meant, and so she immediately refused. "I don't need to be held. Let's go." After she finished speaking, Makio then chased after them. Tanjiro did not force her, and immediately followed. And just as Tanjiro's back foot had just left, there was movement in the pile of rocks. A huge rock inexplicably exploded, and then Akeza and Daki slowly stood up from the collapsed mud, but the figures of the 2 of them were not straight, their shoulders were very slumped, and at the same time their limbs were somewhat strangely twisted. If it was an ordinary person, they would definitely have ascended to heaven, only demons would not be affected in any way. Akeza and Daki quickly repaired their bodies. The bodies that had been broken and twisted by the huge rocks were quickly recovering as before at a speed visible to the naked eye. In just a few seconds, Akeza and Daki had returned to their factory settings, and not a single hair had been damaged. Chase. Akeza did not have any delay, and at the first moment that his body was restored, he immediately set off to chase after Ryaji and Tanjiro, who were evacuating. Although Daki had resentment in her heart, she still did not complain too much, and silently followed Akeza and chased after them. Daki's resentment was naturally generated because her body had actually been ravaged, although as long as she was not attacked in a vital spot by a weapon that could take a demon's life, or her body was destroyed by a deadly poison, her body could recover no matter how much physical destruction it suffered. But despite this, for Daki, she cherished her body extremely. This could only be said to be a matter of personality. After all, the personality and temper of each demon were different. Some demons, relying on their recovery ability, would not care about the damage to their bodies at all, because as long as they were not attacked in a vital spot, it would be as if nothing had happened. The speed of action of Akeza and Daki, who did not have any burden, was obviously a few points faster than Ryaji, although Ryaji could hide his aura, so that Akeza could not locate his position well, but Ryaji did not do this. Because Tanjiro was still unable to do this well, and Uzui Tengen's 2 wives were even more out of the question, they would definitely not be able to do this at all. So, even if Ryaji hid his aura, Akeza could still provide the auras of other people to start tracking. Therefore, Ryaji was too lazy to do these futile efforts. After falling into the cliff, Ryaji was now somewhat unable to figure out the direction, and so he urged Tanjiro, who was closely following behind him, "Tanjiro, hurry up. Tier, $10 Casual Reader, 20 plus Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40 plus Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80 plus Advanced Chapter. $475, Chapter 475. Oni-san, hurry up. Ryaji-senpai is urging us. Tanjiro then also urged Makio, who was running in front of him. In reality, with Tanjiro's speed, he could still keep up with Ryaji. After all, Ryaji was still holding a person. But in order to prevent Makio from falling behind, Tanjiro had been following behind Makio all along. Faced with Tanjiro's urging, Makio's heart then tightened, because this was already her fastest speed. Wanting to be faster, it was clear that it was impossible. After running for a while, seeing that Makio still did not seem to be speeding up, Tanjiro then already knew that Makio had reached her limit, and so he immediately picked her up, and then said very apologetically, "I'm sorry for the offense. Oni-san." Makio, seeing that she was being picked up by Tanjiro, felt helpless in her heart, and could only obediently let Tanjiro carry her. She also knew that now was not the time to be stubborn and hold on. Makio, plus Nezuko in the mist cloud cedar wooden box, although Tanjiro seemed to be carrying one more than Ryaji, in reality, Nezuko was not very heavy. Because Nezuko was in the form of a child of a few years old when she was shrunk in the wooden box, so she weighed at most 20 or 30 pounds, this weight would naturally not cause any burden to Tanjiro, and also Tanjiro carried Nezuko on his back almost every day, so he was naturally used to it. Tanjiro, who had picked up Makio, quickly accelerated and ran to Ryaji's side, and then asked, "Ryaji-senpai, what's wrong?" "Tanjiro, we are now in an unknown location, perhaps we have to rely on your nose to find Zenitsu and them faster." Ryaji then immediately said to Tanjiro. Although Ryaji could search very accurately through perception, Ryaji's perception range was only within a range of 200 meters, so he could not determine the general direction. And also now he was under a 400-meter cliff, so whether Zenitsu could hear his step frequency signal was also an unknown. He was just afraid that he would run in the wrong direction, causing the two teams of people to be unable to join up. Ryaji naturally did not know at this time that Kokushibo had intercepted Zenitsu Agatsuma and his group, so he still thought that Zenitsu Agatsuma was leading the team and chasing behind him. Even though at the critical moment, Shinobu Koko and Kyojuro Rengoku's support allowed Zenitsu Agatsuma, Inashuk, and Hattori Kyujo to escape and go to support Ryaji, but this delay undoubtedly caused Zenitsu Agatsuma to lose Ryaji's trail marks. And also Zenitsu Agatsuma was still in a coma. Whether Hattori Kyujo and Inashuk could join up with Ryaji in a situation where they had lost any clues was also an unknown. Hearing these words, Tanjiro took a breath with his nose, and carefully analyzed it. Because it was raining heavily, the humidity in the air was very high, and the smells were very faint, so Tanjiro did not smell anything. "Ryaji-senpai, Zenitsu and them should be on the mountain, and we are at the bottom of the mountain. The smells are not on the same horizontal line, so it is not very possible to smell their scent." Tanjiro then replied. The emission of smells was horizontal. If Zenitsu Agatsuma was on the mountain, then it was impossible for Zenitsu Agatsuma's smell to overcome such an exaggerated height difference, and emit to the bottom of the 400-meter mountain, so Tanjiro could not smell Zenitsu Agatsuma's or other people's scents. Only when Tanjiro and the owner of the scent were both in a relatively horizontal position could Tanjiro possibly smell the scent. Tanjiro's words made Ryaji also realize this point, so in order to find Zenitsu Agatsuma and them, he could only find the road to the cliff first. Tier, $10 Casual Reader, 20 plus Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40 plus Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80 plus Advanced Chapter. 476, Chapter 476. Ryaji looked up at the almost vertical cliff wall. It was clear that it was impossible to go up from here. Afterwards, Ryaji looked left and right again, and discovered that the location where he was in the gap between two mountains, saying it was a gap. In reality, the bottom was very spacious, enough for more than 10 vehicles to drive side by side. And also because of this kind of terrain, there was basically no place to hide here. He could only keep moving forward, find a place where the cliff was not so steep, and go back up the mountain. "Speed up, those two upper ranks are catching up," Ryaji then said again. Because Akeza and Daki had already entered Ryaji's 200-meter perception range, Ryaji then knew that Akaza and Daki were catching up, but Ryaji did not expect that their reaction speed would be so fast. Just as Ryaji's voice fell, Makio, who was being carried by Tanjiro, also immediately saw Akaza and Daki, who were chasing after them. And also because of the terrain and landform, there were completely no trees and shrubs that could block the view under the cliff, so Makio, who was facing backwards, immediately saw Akaza and Daki, who were 200 meters away. "They are behind us. Run faster." Makio then patted Tanjiro's butt, and urged him somewhat anxiously. Tanjiro did not care to look back, and could only try his best to speed up his pace. Ryaji and Akaza's sides chased each other like this, for a few minutes. And in these few minutes, the distance between Akaza and Daki and Ryaji and Tanjiro was getting closer and closer. It was not that Ryaji could not run past Akaza and Daki, but rather Tanjiro could not run past them, because Ryaji could feel that Tanjiro's speed had reached its limit. In order to prevent Tanjiro from falling behind, Ryaji had not continued to speed up all along. Otherwise, Ryaji could completely drop Tanjiro and get rid of Akaza and Daki's pursuit. When the distance between the two sides suddenly pulled to a distance of 50 meters, Daki then launched a dense sash attack on Tanjiro. This situation was also keenly sensed by Ryaji, and at the same time, Makio also saw that Daki had launched an attack, and so she loudly reminded Tanjiro, "Dodge quickly." Tanjiro also wanted to dodge, but because he could not see the situation behind him, he did not know where to dodge at all. "Take the initiative to hug me tight. I am going to take action." And Ryaji then said to Suma very calmly at this time. Suma, hearing Ryaji's words, although she did not know what Ryaji was going to do, she still quickly adjusted her posture. Her legs took the initiative to clamp around Ryaji's waist, and then her hands tightly hooked Ryaji's neck, and at the same time, in order to avoid blocking Ryaji's line of sight, Suma also turned her head to Ryaji's ear. Although this posture was even more intimate, in this critical moment, she could not care about so much. Suma, after changing her posture, also saw the situation behind Ryaji. The dense sashes were only 2 or 3 meters away from Tanjiro. And at the same time, after Suma readjusted her posture, Ryaji suddenly stopped running, his feet sliding in the silky grass because of inertia. Then, Ryaji's hand then gripped the demon-slaying sword at his waist. During the sliding process, Ryaji's body leaned forward slightly, and his feet put on a bow stance. In the next moment, the sound of the blade being unsheathed was heard. Water breathing, 13th form, domain judgment. Tier, $10 casual reader, 20+ advanced chapter. $20 intermediate reader, 40+ advanced chapter. $40 expert reader, 80+ advanced chapter. 477, chapter 477. It could be seen that Ryaji's blade had only been unsheathed halfway, and was then instantly pushed back into the scabbard by Ryaji. And in the process of the blade being unsheathed, the calm airflow around Ryaji suddenly began to rotate violently, and those falling raindrops were also rotating along with the vortex airflow. When the blade returned to the scabbard, the accumulated water under Ryaji's feet rippled greatly, and this ripple spread to the surroundings at an extremely fast speed. The entire process happened in the space of a breath, and then dense water blade sword auras appeared behind Tanjiro. These water blade sword auras were all locked on Daki's sashes. In the blink of an eye, Daki's sashes were twisted into pieces of cloth by Ryaji's water blade sword auras, and floated in the air. At the same time, Ryaji's figure also stopped because the inertia had disappeared. Tanjiro, carrying Makio, just brushed past Ryaji like this. Tanjiro's expression suddenly became somewhat at a loss, and at the same time, his footsteps then stopped. But because of inertia, Tanjiro was still sliding forward. Ryaji did not have any hesitation or delay. It seemed that he already knew what to do next in his mind, and immediately said to Suma, "Come down quickly, don't think about anything now, just run forward." Ryaji's words were like a magic spell in Suma's ear. Suma released Ryaji all of a sudden, and then at the moment she turned around and ran away. She gave Ryaji a final affectionate look. This affectionate look from Suma did not mean that she had fallen in love with Ryaji, it only had concern for Ryaji. The more meaning in that look was like reminding Ryaji to be careful. Ryaji naturally did not overinterpret Suma's eyes, but rather ordered Tanjiro, who had stopped, "Tanjiro, go quickly. Leave this place to me." Suma did not hesitate any longer and turned around and ran out, because all she could do now was only this. If she did not run, and stayed, it was estimated that she would only become Ryaji's burden, and in the end, become Ryaji's burial object. So running, this was not a selfish expression, because the situation was like this. Secondly, Suma felt that Ryaji had the strength to deal with it, so Suma would rest assured and run away first, so that she would not affect Ryaji. And also Suma successfully escaping was what Ryaji wanted to see, because the system's requirement was to save both Suma and Makio, or one of them, so that Ryaji could get the mission reward. But Ryaji did not come to save people entirely because of the mission. Even if there was no mission, Ryaji would try his best to save them. As Suma turned around and started running, Ryaji also turned around and faced Akeza and Daki, who were chasing after them. Tanjiro, seeing Ryaji's back as he turned around, also had his own plans in his heart, and in the end, he did not forget to say to Ryaji, "Ryaji-senpai, be careful, you must hold on, I will bring them to a safe place and come back to find you." Flame breathing, 9th form, Purgatory. Flame breathing, 9th form, Purgatory. This technique is the final form of flame breathing, and also the most powerful form. When the technique is released, the caster's entire body will be covered in flames, and a roar will erupt, rushing forward like a meteor. The powerful flame impact can instantly cause burns to the demon's skin, internal organs, and even bones. The burns can affect the demon's recovery ability in a short period of time, allowing the demon to feel pain that penetrates into the bone marrow. Because it is an impact technique, it is not possible to use slashes during this process. The impact point is triggered by the hilt of the Nichiren blade. This was also the first time that Ryaji had used flame breathing. It was also because he was forced by the situation that Ryaji chose to use flame breathing. Tier, $10 Casual Reader, 20+ Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40+ Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80+ Advanced Chapter. 478, Chapter 478. Because Akeza had already launched Annihilation Style and rushed in, Ryaji had already learned this trick from Akeza during the Infinity Train. It was a trick with very terrifying explosive power. Ryaji had used Wood Breathing, 1st form, Wood Infestation, Pierce, to collide with it at that time. Although Wood Infestation had successfully destroyed Akeza's arm, Ryaji's arm had also been broken by Akeza. It could be said that that was the first time Ryaji had been injured in his demon hunting career, so Ryaji's impression was very deep. After feeling the familiar aura that Akeza was emitting, he knew that Akeza had used Annihilation Style. And in the techniques of water breathing, there was no high explosive technique that could compete with it. If he used Wood Infestation, Pierce to fight it at this time, it was estimated that the result would be the same as last time, and Ryaji knew that he could not be injured now, because this was not a one-on-one situation. There was also Daki. Ryaji had to hold her back as well. If he was injured, he would definitely not be able to hold back two upper-rank demons. If Ryaji dodged Akeza's attack, then Akeza would definitely take the opportunity to go towards Tanjiro, leaving Tanjiro behind. Ryaji had also thought of this point, so Ryaji could not dodge, he could only block Akeza's attack. As such, flame breathing, 9th form, Purgatory Meteor, had become the technique that Ryaji could take out to fight against Akeza. After all, it would be a waste if he did not use the breathing techniques that he had mastered. And Tanjiro, after bidding farewell to Ryaji, then turned around and ran away without any hesitation. Tanjiro believed that this was the most stable and feasible decision, and also Tanjiro's reassuring performance of Ryaji's strength. Even if Ryaji could not kill upper-rank demons, he would definitely have the ability to cope and restrain them. So Tanjiro planned to transfer Makio and Suma to a safe place first, and then come back to face the enemy with Ryaji. The moment Ryaji activated Flame Breathing, 9th form, Purgatory Meteor, his whole body was covered in flames. The heavy rain fell on those flames, and was instantly evaporated into water vapor by the high temperature. In the next moment, Ryaji's figure rushed towards Akeza like a meteor. In the surroundings where Ryaji flashed past, it instantly became dry and hot, and the rain seemed to have stopped at that moment. Those raindrops that had not yet fallen were instantly evaporated, and even the accumulated water in the surrounding grass was also evaporated. And wherever Ryaji went, the tender grass under his feet was directly and ruthlessly carbonized into black dust. Outside Ryaji's trajectory, those tender grasses, although they were not burned in an instant, were ignited by the high temperature, and burned. Then, Ryaji, whose whole body was on fire, then collided with Akaza. Ryaji's hilt of the sword collided with Akaza's fist that was swinging over. Ryaji and Akaza's figures also fixed in place along with it. A powerful shock wave spread out from the center of the collision between Ryaji and Akaza, and instantly destroyed the falling raindrops within a radius of 30 meters. The cliff walls on both sides of the mountain were cracked by the shock wave. That area seemed to have cleared up, but in contrast to other places, raindrops were still falling non-stop. After the shock wave's vibration ended, the surrounding airflow suddenly became turbulent, and a strong hurricane surged. The flames around Ryaji's body were all dancing with the hurricane, and Daki, who wanted to take the opportunity to chase after Tanjiro, was forced back by the powerful shock wave just now, causing her to lose the opportunity to chase after Tanjiro at the first opportunity. Tier $10 Casual Reader, 20 plus Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40 plus Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80 plus Advanced Chapter. 479, Chapter 479. Just a few seconds after Akaza's fist came into contact with Ryaji's purgatory meteor, Akaza's arm was immediately burned by the extremely terrifying high temperature. The first thing to be affected was naturally the skin. The moisture in the skin was instantly evaporated, and it was directly burned off, revealing the muscles under the skin. The muscles were directly burned and quickly withered, until they were carbonized, and finally it penetrated into the bones. And that burn not only affected the arm. Following the arm, the burning sensation then spread to the chest, and even the entire torso, but compared to the arm that was in direct contact with the attack, the degree to which the chest was affected was not so serious, but it could still be visually seen that the vest that Akaza was wearing on his body was directly burned. It was conceivable how terrifying the temperature that Akaza's body was now under. Akaza's expression became extremely painful, because the feeling of the internal organs being burned, even for a demon, was not easy to withstand. And Akaza's arm, which had been completely carbonized into a matchstick, could no longer withstand Ryaji's powerful impact, and was then shattered by the impact, losing the obstruction of power. Ryaji's figure, like a meteor, then brushed past Akaza's side. Even if it was just brushing past, the flames on Ryaji's body still burned off the hair on one side of Akaza's head, and at the same time, the skin on half of Akaza's face was also slightly burned. Under the action of inertia, Ryaji's figure continued to impact forward for more than 10 meters before stopping, and Akaza had already knelt on the ground, supporting the ground with one hand, and issuing a painful roar. At this time Akaza was using his powerful recovery to fight against the burning sensation that had invaded his body. If he did not take the initiative to do so, then the burning sensation would only stay in Akaza's body for a longer time, and this had already affected Akaza's ability to fight. After Ryaji's figure stopped, the flames attached to his body then slowly dissipated. Although the flames dissipated, there was still hot air coming out around Ryaji's body. The activation of Purgatory Meteor had made Ryaji's body temperature reach a temperature that was different from ordinary people. What are you still standing there dumbfounded for? Quickly let your ugly brother, who doesn't dare to see people, come out. As for you, hurry up and complete what you should do. My mission is only to hold Ryaji back. If you don't kill that Tanjiro, you can handle it yourself with the Lord. The expression on Akaza's face became hideous because of the pain, and at the same time, it could be heard from his tone that he was extremely angry. Daki, being roared at like this by Akaza, was also shocked by Akaza's words. Just as Akaza's voice fell, Ryaji then launched a pursuit on Akaza. Flame breathing, first form, unknowing fire. This technique is a breakthrough strike type technique, but the breakthrough speed is naturally not as fast as Purgatory Meteor. But it is much faster than the flowing dance footwork of water breathing. In the blink of an eye, Ryaji's figure had already arrived in front of Akaza, and at the same time, the blade of the demon-slaying sword that had been pulled out in his hand had already burst into flames, and then swung towards Akaza's neck. Annihilation type, final form, blue-silver chaotic afterglow. Akaza was also very decisive in using his life-saving skill. In an instant, the compass needle on the ice flower formation under Akaza's body rotated rapidly, and immediately sharp ice blades radiated out towards the surroundings. Flame breathing, fourth form, blooming flame undulation. Ryaji then modified and used the fourth form of flame breathing to cope with it. Tier, $10 Casual Reader, 20 plus Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40 plus Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80 plus Advanced Chapter. 480, Chapter 480. Immediately, countless flame crescent blades gathered and rotated in front of Ryaji, and the ice blades shot out by Akeza's compass needle then collided with the shield formed by the flame crescent blades. In the next second, after the heavy rain lost its separation, it then fell again. A large number of ice blades that were shot out collided with the shield formed by the flame crescent blades, and then collapsed all of a sudden, and were evaporated into water vapor by the high temperature. And just as Ryaji and Akeza collided again, Daki took the initiative to summon her brother. Brother, come out quickly, Daki needs your help. Under Daki's summons, Daki's back suddenly arched up, as if something was trying to break free from Daki's body. Daki's figure was also pressed to the ground. In the end, she did not see Daki's brother break out of Daki's back, but rather Daki's brother split out from Daki's body. What split out from Daki's body was a hunched man, and his features were not only ugly, but also had large black spots. He was a strange man. This man was Daki's ugly brother that Akeza had mentioned, named Jayataro. He maintained a symbiotic relationship with Daki. He usually stayed in Daki's body, and would only come out when his younger sister actively called him, or when he encountered something that could not be resolved. So the upper rank 6 was not only referring to Daki alone, but rather referring to this pair of symbiotic siblings, Daki and Jayataro. My beautiful sister, what's wrong? Where is this? Why isn't it in the red light district? After Jayataro came out, he then murmured and asked Daki. Jayataro's voice was very hoarse and lifeless, making people feel as if he would die at any time. Brother, you help Akezadano deal with that white-haired kid here. I am going to complete the mission that the Lord has given me. Daki also briefly explained to her brother, and then immediately got up, and took advantage of the opportunity where Ryaji was being restrained by Akeza, and immediately went to chase after Tanjiro, who had already run away. Jayataro did not ask any more questions, and quickly turned to Ryaji, and then the blood energy that spread from the palms of his hands then generated 2 small sickles all of a sudden. On the other side, in the collision of ice and fire, in the end Ryaji's fire took the victory. Akeza's blue-silver chaotic afterglow ultimately did not break through Ryaji's blooming flame undulation. In the end, the ice blades of Akeza's compass needle ice flower needle were all emitted and exhausted. The flame crescent blade shield that was rotating in front of Ryaji then transformed into a fire phoenix in the next moment and swooped towards Akeza. Ryaji was also very surprised by Jayataro's appearance. After all, Ryaji thought that Daki would at most only change her form at that time. He did not expect that she would split out a new individual, which made the situation change. So even if Ryaji had immediately stopped Daki from leaving at that time, Jayataro would definitely have taken action to stop him, not to mention that Ryaji was still confronting Akeza at that time, and could not free his hands to cope with it for a while. Jayataro did not intend to help Akeza block the attack, but rather directly launched an attack on Ryaji. And the fire phoenix that had been transformed from blooming flame undulation then directly impacted on Akeza's stomach. Akeza had not completely recovered from the damage that his body had suffered from Ryaji's purgatory meteor. And his body had not recovered to its best state, and also because the distance was very close, Akeza had no possibility of dodging. The fire phoenix then opened a large hole in Akeza's abdomen. Akeza, who had been severely damaged again, then widened his mouth, and a mouthful of blood coughed out from his mouth. Although this was a good opportunity to take the opportunity to kill Akeza, Jayataro's intervention prevented Ryaji from continuing to launch a pursuit on Akeza for the time being. Tier, $10 Casual Reader, 20 plus Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40 plus Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80 plus Advanced Chapter. 481, Chapter 481. Jayataro, who had rushed in front of Ryaji, swung the sickles in his hands frantically towards Ryaji. His posture was completely like a madman's behavior. From the way Jayataro attacked, it could be seen that Jayataro was completely self-taught. Although he was self-taught, every slash was aimed at Ryaji's vitals. Water breathing, first form, modified, water surface slash, chain slash. Ryaji was not at all polite. He changed his breathing technique, and directly used water surface slash, chain slash to deal with Jayataro. Now Ryaji was a man who could make 10 slashes a second, so to deal with this kind of self-taught person who attacked without any rules, he had to use a technique that was even wilder than it. With 10 slashes a second, Ryaji easily resolved Jayatero's attack, but only resolving Jayatero's attack was not enough. Ryaji directly relied on his extremely fast slashes, and with Jayatero not having any chance to dodge or parry, he instantly cut off his hands and neck. After doing these things, Ryaji then stopped his technique and stopped attacking. When Ryaji stopped his technique, Jayatero's head rolled down from his neck because his neck had been cut. Ryaji did not expect that he would resolve Jayatero so easily, and so he immediately transferred his attention to Akeza. The big hole in Akeza's stomach had been repaired by him, and the arm that had been broken by Purgatory Meteor before had also grown out. Because Akeza was not directly injured by Ryaji's demon-slaying sword, Akeza's recovery ability was not suppressed. Akeza, who had recovered, did not take the initiative to launch an attack on Ryaji, because Akeza now knew that it was unlikely that he could kill Ryaji, and so he did not take the initiative to attack again. After all, Akeza's mission was only to hold Ryaji back. As long as Ryaji could not support Tanjiro, then with Daki's ability, dealing with Tanjiro would definitely not be too difficult. As for whether Ryaji lived or died, it was no longer important. And Jayatero's figure, who had been beheaded by Ryaji, was still standing upright in place, and did not have any intention of falling down. You can actually use two kinds of breathing techniques. Akeza then took the initiative to start a conversation with Ryaji, attempting to delay Ryaji through talking. For a demon hunter who could use two different breathing techniques, Akeza had also encountered him for the first time. So Ryaji was really refreshing Akeza's understanding again and again. When had the Demon Slayer core become so powerful? Ryaji naturally also knew Akeza's intention, so he did not intend to chat with Akeza too much, but rather simply suggested to Akeza, "You can now choose to disappear from my sight, so that you might be able to live a little longer." In reality, Ryaji did not want to waste time with Akeza here either, although after mastering flame breathing, Ryaji's chances of winning had increased a lot, but he could not say that he would kill Akeza if he wanted to. Moreover, Akeza should only want to hold him back, because Akeza's fighting style was definitely unusually wretched, so it would not be easy for Ryaji to kill Akeza. "I will also give you a choice, join us, you can get eternal life, status, wealth, and women. As long as you say a word, Daki will become your plaything under your crotch." Akeza then continued to win him over. In reality, Akeza also knew that Ryaji would definitely not agree. If Ryaji had this idea, Ryaji would have agreed long ago. How could he have gotten to this point? Tier, $10 Casual Reader, 20+ Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40+ Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80+ Advanced Chapter. 482, Chapter 482. Just as Akeza's reaction had just fallen, Jayatero's body suddenly moved behind Ryaji. Ryaji had already noticed that something was wrong, and just as he wanted to draw his sword and activate water breathing, 12th form, rushing rivers, Jayatero had already hugged Ryaji tightly, which caused Ryaji to be unable to draw his sword and activate the technique. After being hugged tightly by Jayatero, Ryaji felt puzzled in his heart. Could it be that Jayatero had not died yet? But Jayatero's head had already been cut off. Or was his neck not Jayatero's vital point? After being hugged by Jayatero, Ryaji's brain turned quickly, and he quickly analyzed many reasons. Either his neck was not Jayatero's fatal weakness, or Jayatero was not the main body. The later analysis was what Ryaji had learned from Jayatero splitting out from Daki's body. Whether it was specifically like this still needed to be verified. However, Ryaji could be sure that cutting off Jayatero's neck clearly did not endanger his life. If Ryaji had not verified it again at that time, it was because Jayatero had lost his action after his neck was cut, so Ryaji mistakenly thought that Jayatero had died. Although there was still an aura present, the aura would not disappear until the corpse had completely dissipated after the demon's death, so Ryaji did not pay too much attention to Jayatero. And the reason why Jayatero had suddenly stopped acting after being beheaded by Ryaji was also because he had been shocked by Ryaji's show of strength. If he had not maintained a symbiotic relationship with Daki, he would definitely have been killed by Ryaji in seconds just now. Because he had a symbiotic relationship with Daki, Jayatero and Daki's lives were linked together, that was to say, only cutting off the neck of one of them would not have any impact on them, only cutting off the necks of both Daki and Jayataro at the same time could end the lives of both of them. Although Ryaji had not killed Jayataro, he had prevented Jayataro's severed hands and head from healing at the first moment. Because Jayataro's wound was injured by Ryaji's demon-slaying sword, it suppressed Jayataro's regeneration and recovery. If Ryaji took advantage of the time when Jayataro's head and body had lost contact, and could not regenerate immediately, and cut off Daki's neck, then he could also disintegrate the symbiotic relationship between the two. That was to say, as long as Daki's head was cut off again before Jayataro's head was reattached or regenerated, he could also disintegrate the lives of both of them. In theory, it was indeed not necessary to cut off the necks of both of them at the same time. But in practice, he had to cut off both of them at the same time to have the possibility of killing Daki and Jayataro. Because in reality, if he cut off Daki's neck first, and then cut off Jayataro's, Daki, whose neck had been cut off before, would definitely regenerate her neck or reattach it at the first moment, so Daki and Jayataro would not give you too much time to cut off the neck of the second one. Therefore in practice, only cutting off the necks of both of them at almost the same time could disintegrate this symbiotic relationship. Compared to a single entity, this symbiotic relationship was indeed much more difficult to deal with. Of course, there was also a way to cut off the symbiotic relationship between the two. That was to let one of them accept the baptism of sunlight, so that he could kill only one person unilaterally. Tier $10 Casual Reader, 20+ Advanced Chapter. $20 Intermediate Reader, 40+ Advanced Chapter. $40 Expert Reader, 80+ Advanced Chapter. 483 Chapter 483. When the sun kills all the cells of one of them, this symbiotic relationship will no longer exist, and at this time, cutting off the neck of the other person unilaterally can end the life of the other person unilaterally. If this symbiotic relationship between Daki and Jayataro was that both sides had half of each other's cells, then the situation would be different. Because even if one of Daki and Jayataro was killed by sunlight, the other person could still rely on the remaining half of the cells to split out a new individual. As for whether it would be affected by other factors, it was not known. Returning to the situation just now, because Ryaji's demon-slaying sword could inhibit Jayataro's regeneration and recovery, Jayataro could not reattach or regenerate a new head at the first moment, so there was a time difference of a few seconds. It was also in this time difference of a few seconds that if he cut off Daki's neck, then the kill would still be effective. Only Ryaji could fight for this little bit of time difference. If Daki and Jayataro encountered someone else, then there would definitely not be this time difference, and Daki and Jayataro would not be stupid enough to give you this time difference. So this was why it was said that in practice, he had to cut off the necks of both of them at the same time. Just as Jayataro tightly hugged Ryaji, Ryaji tried to struggle, and found that he could not break free with his body strength in the normal state. Ryaji activated the demon god transformation without any hesitation. Because just as Ryaji activated the demon god transformation, Akaza's attack had already hit Ryaji's head. Ryaji, along with Jayataro, was directly blasted away by Akaza for more than 20 meters. Fortunately, Ryaji had already activated the demon god transformation, otherwise with Ryaji's physical strength in the normal state, without any parrying, and taking such a blow, he would definitely have his head blown off by Akaza. It had to be said that Akaza was very good at judging and controlling the situation, taking advantage of the great opportunity where Ryaji was being controlled. Without any hesitation, he very decisively launched Annihilation style on Ryaji. Fortunately, Ryaji had kept a trick up his sleeve, and had not completely used up his demon god power. After giving Ryaji a blow, Akaza did not chase again, but rather stood in place, continuing to observe the situation. When he used Annihilation style to punch Ryaji on the head, Akaza had already seen Ryaji's form change. So Akaza knew that the attack just now had not succeeded. If he had been a little faster, he might have really sent Ryaji on his way. Unable to help it, Akaza became annoyed. This was the first time Akaza had been annoyed because of a failed attack. In previous battles, even if he missed, Akaza would not care too much, because there would definitely be other opportunities. But, facing Ryaji was different. He knew that it would be difficult to have the same opportunity as just now after this time. Ryaji, who had been blasted away for more than 20 meters, broke free from Jyotaro's control immediately after his figure stopped flying. In the state of demon god transformation, Ryaji easily broke free from Jyotaro's control. After breaking free from Jyotaro's control, Ryaji grabbed Jyotaro's ankle, and then used Jyotaro as a bludgeon, and slammed him on the ground wildly. This could be regarded as Ryaji's revenge on Jyotaro. After all, this guy had almost caused him to capsize in the gutter just now. It would naturally be unreasonable not to give this guy a lesson. 484, Chapter 484. Huge crashing sounds kept ringing out. Akaza, watching Ryaji play Jyotaro as a bludgeon, felt somewhat aggrieved in his heart. Jyotaro was an upper rank of the 12 Kazuki. An existence of the same class as himself, was actually treated as a chick by Ryaji. Although it was not himself who was being used as a bludgeon, Akaza still felt that this was a disgrace to the 12 Kazuki. What made Akaza somewhat unable to accept the most was that he actually did not dare to go up and give Ryaji a piece of his mind. Akaza also did not believe that he had become so useless. He was the upper rank 3 of the 12 Kazuki. My mission is only to hold him back. Hold him back. The other things are not what I should be concerned about. What's more, this kind of attack will not kill him. Akaza could not help but secretly remind himself in his heart not to think too much. And Jyotaro naturally did not need to be said. Even if he was an upper rank demon with a powerful regeneration and recovery ability, most of the bones in his body had definitely been broken by Ryaji. He had to know that the power strength of Ryaji in the demon god transformation was not to be trifled with. After Ryaji had vented, he then threw Jyotaro away casually. Jyotaro was now like a salted fish, his body was soft, and there was no movement. Ryaji looked down at Jyotaro, who had been beheaded and had half of his arm cut off, and then said unhappily, "You're pretending to be dead again. I'll let you pretend." As the 3 words, "I'll let you pretend," came out, Ryaji then punched Jyotaro's left chest, directly punching through Jyotaro's chest. Jyotaro's feet then kicked up, and then fell down again. Ryaji punched through Jyotaro's chest, for the sake of absorbing some demon blood through his arm to replenish his demon god power. Although Jyotaro was an ugly monster, the current situation did not allow Ryaji to care about so much. And Jyotaro, who had been absorbed of his blood, struggled slightly, under Ryaji's absorption. Jyotaro's body withered little by little. It was clear that the amount Ryaji was absorbing was very large. After Ryaji had almost drained Jyotaro's blood, he then pulled his hand out. With the blood supply of an upper rank demon, all of the demon god power that Ryaji had consumed before was replenished. However, Ryaji did not let Jyotaro off so easily, but rather pulled out the demon-slaying sword on his waist, and then inserted it into Jyotaro's right chest. Ryaji planned to take this opportunity to let the demon-slaying sword also have a taste of blood. After all, it had not been nourished by demon blood for a long time, so its level had always been at the level of ordinary top grade. He did not know whether the blood of an upper-rank demon could allow the demon-slaying sword to upgrade. The reason why Ryaji's demon-slaying sword had not been upgraded much was because the demon-slaying sword seemed to not upgrade after reaching the ordinary top grade. But Ryaji felt that it might be related to the purity of the demon blood. Perhaps low-level demons could no longer satisfy the demon-slaying sword. And lower-rank demons had already been annihilated. Ryaji had only come into contact with the remaining upper-rank demons twice. So, this rare opportunity was just right to test it out. After inserting the demon-slaying sword into Jyotaro's right chest, Jyotaro seemed to want to break free from Ryaji's control, but he was beaten obedient again by Ryaji with a few punches. Afterwards, Ryaji then transferred his attention to Akaza, who was standing 20 meters away, and had not made any movements all along. Akaza's inaction made Ryaji even more certain that this guy only wanted to restrain him, and had not thought about killing him at all. His behavior just now might have been because he had seen an opportunity, and then tried to take action. 485, Chapter 485. The atmosphere suddenly became somewhat quiet. Ryaji looked at Akaza, and then ridiculed him. "What's wrong? Are you afraid? As an upper rank of the 12 Kazuki, I didn't expect you to be a coward." Hearing Ryaji's words, Akaza's expression was very ugly. He wanted to refute but could not find any reason, because his current behavior was a manifestation of cowardice. "My mission is only to hold you back. I don't have the leisure to fight you. You also don't get too carried away. We are at most evenly matched. If you are so awesome, come and kill me now." Akaza, after thinking, then suppressed the resentment in his heart, and responded, "To tell you the truth, you think we are targeting you, but you are not the main target of our operation this time. Although that Tanjiro brat ran away, but he has also been completely isolated. Because the other group of people you arranged to chase behind have been blocked by Kokushibo in the red light district, it is impossible for them to join up with you, because they will be mercilessly killed by Kokushibo. As for you, you can only collect their corpses. No, perhaps Kokushibo will not leave you with any corpses. Ha ha ha." As Akaza said this, he laughed even more ruthlessly. That smile was more to give himself comfort. Because Akaza knew that he could not cause any impact on Ryaji from a physical aspect, Akaza then planned to start from the mental aspect. The demon hunters of the Demon Slayer Corps were all a group of emotional guys in Akaza's eyes. If Ryaji knew that everyone except him would be killed, then the feeling in his heart would definitely not be good. "I forgot that there is also that Tanjiro, that brat will definitely be killed by Daki who is chasing after him. And you, no matter how powerful you are, what can you do in the end?" Akaza then continued to add. Listening to Akaza's narration, Ryaji was indeed affected. What Ryaji did not expect was that Kokushibo, the head of the upper ranks, had actually ambushed in the red light district, for the sake of intercepting Uzui Tengen and them. In this way, the one who was really in danger was not himself, but rather the others. It was really a good calculation. However, this also confirmed that Muzan Kibutsuji was really very wary of him, otherwise he would definitely not have designed it like this. But, Ryaji still suppressed the anger that rose in his heart, because even if Kokushibo intercepted Uzui Tengen and them, even if they were not a match for Kokushibo together, Uzui Tengen should still have the ability to restrain Kokushibo, and then by Zenitsu Agatsuma, Inashuk, and Hattori Kyujo time to retreat. Although doing so was very likely to cause Uzui Tengen to die in Kokushibo's hands, it was better than everyone dying. Ryaji believed that at the critical moment, Uzui Tengen would definitely choose to do this. And Ryaji did not have too deep of an intersection with Uzui Tengen, so he would not be too sad because of his death. It was not that Ryaji was ruthless, but rather if things really got to that point, then there was no way to avoid it. Tanjiro, Ryaji was not too worried about either, because Tanjiro was still carrying Nezuko. Even if Nezuko could not beat Daki, she could still restrain Daki to some extent. So the situation was not very bad. In addition, as long as Makio and Suma successfully escaped from danger, Ryaji's rescue mission would be completed, and Ryaji, who had obtained the reward, would definitely have his normal strength improved, and it would not be impossible to control the battle situation at that time. 486, Chapter 486. So, the most important thing to do now was to beat Akaza away or kill him directly. Seeing that Ryaji was silent, Akaza thought that Ryaji could not accept this ending in his heart, and so his aggrieved mood could not help but improve, and a faint smile hung on the corner of his mouth again. And just as Ryaji and Akaza were negotiating, Jayataro's wound was no longer suppressed by the demon-slaying sword, and then his severed arms and ugly head then quickly regenerated, and at the same time, the chest that had been punched through by Ryaji was also healed back. The shriveled body that had been drained of blood before also returned to its previous state. It seemed that the blood in his body had been recreated by Jayataro. After his head regenerated, Jayataro then roared at Akaza, who was unmoved, "Don't stand there like an idiot. This guy's weapon is sucking my blood. If you are still foolishly unmoved, no one knows what the consequences will be." Jayataro's roar was actually also dissatisfaction with Akaza's inaction. Ryaji, hearing these words, looked down at Jayataro, who was nailed to the ground by the demon-slaying sword. He did not expect that Jayataro would regenerate a new head and arms so quickly, and even the wound on his chest had been restored as before. Jayataro did not choose to get rid of Ryaji's control at the first moment this time, but rather chose to report the situation to Akaza, because Jayataro knew that if he made a move, he would definitely be violently beaten by Ryaji. And Akaza, this idiot, would definitely only watch foolishly, so Jayataro knew that it was unlikely that he could get rid of Ryaji's control. Only with Akaza taking action to restrain him could Jayataro possibly escape from Ryaji's clutches. Most importantly, Jayataro had just been drained of his blood by Ryaji once, and now he was being bled by Ryaji's demon-slaying sword. Therefore Jayataro knew that this was not a good thing. although being drained of blood did not cause any impact on himself, Ryaji must have his own plans for doing so. Jayataro could see this point from the fact that Ryaji did not take the initiative to attack Akeza either. However, just as Jayataro's voice fell, Ryaji then punched Jayataro's head, turning Jayataro's head 90 degrees, and hitting it into the mud. His intentions had been discovered. Ryaji did not know what Akeza would plan to do. So Ryaji's line of sight quickly transferred to Akeza again. And at the same time, Jayataro's actions were not affected in any way, and suddenly raised his hands and aimed them at Ryaji. Blood Demon Art, Hemokinesis, Rotating Circular Slashes, Flying Blood Scythes. Blood Demon Art, Hemokinesis, Rotating Circular Slashes, Flying Blood Scythes. One of Jayataro's blood demon arts, Jayataro creates sharp air blades similar to dragon tornadoes on his arms, and launches a strangulation attack on the enemy. As Jayataro's blood demon art was activated, black tornado air blades with terrifying power then appeared on Jayataro's arms. The two black tornado air blades sandwiched Ryaji in the middle, and in an instant, the clothes on Ryaji's body were strangled into pieces, and then his purple body was exposed. The clothes that Ryaji was wearing at that time were the clothes that Shinobu Koko had specially made for him. Ryaji was naturally extremely angry that the clothes had been destroyed. Fortunately, Ryaji was in the state of demon god transformation at that time, so he was not greatly affected, but because he did not use demon god power to activate protection, Ryaji's demon god transformation body was still scratched by Jayataro's tornado air blades. Purple blood then seeped out of the wound. Fortunately the wound was not deep, so the amount of bleeding was very limited. 487, Chapter 487. It could be said that this was the first time Ryaji had been injured in the state of demon god transformation. The reason why Ryaji was injured was because he did not want to consume too much demon god power, so he did not use the black aura of the demon god to cover his body, which caused Ryaji's body to be injured after being attacked by Jayataro. However, even without the protection of the black aura, the strength of the demon god transformation body was also very high. This could be seen from Ryaji's wound. Soon, those wounds on Ryaji's body were quickly healed under the repair of the demon god power. And after hearing Jayataro's report, Akeza, who had rushed up, saw the scene where Ryaji's wound healed quickly, and his eyes were filled with horror and fear. Did Ryaji also have a super recovery ability? The ability that Ryaji had shown was too similar to the demon, but he did not have the huge defect of demons fearing sunlight, and he also did not seem to need to eat people to maintain his power. Ryaji could be said to be the best state that Muzan Kibutsuji and the upper ranks were pursuing, and also the most perfect state. Therefore, Akeza was so shocked. A creature that was stronger than humans, and more perfect than demons, had appeared in front of him at this time. Suddenly another idea popped out of Akeza's head, or was it that this guy had started to absorb Jayataro's blood, and so he had obtained the ability of a demon? If this was the case, then had Ryaji already become a demon? In the blink of an eye, Akeza had already rushed in front of Ryaji. Destructive Death, Annihilation Type. Akeza, after rushing in front of Ryaji, did not think too much, and directly used Chaotic Style to launch a fierce attack on Ryaji. Being attacked by Jayataro, Ryaji could be said to have been forced to. After all, Jayataro's attack was launched at the same time as Ryaji's attack. There was no possibility of dodging in such a close range. But if Ryaji was still injured by Akeza's attack, then it would really be unreasonable. Ryaji then activated the Black Aura Protection, and then immediately pulled out the demon-slaying sword that was inserted in Jayataro's body, and then gave Akeza a counterattack. Demon God Breathing, Demon-Slaying Chain Slash. Ryaji directly used demon god power to drive, Water Breathing, First Form, Modified, Water Surface Slash, Chain Slash. The release of the technique was still the same, but the driving force had undergone an essential change. Under the drive of demon god power, the power of the chain slash naturally became more domineering and powerful. At the same time, demon god power greatly restrained demons. Being attacked by it would have the effect of true damage, and also had a great suppression on the regeneration and recovery of demons. The suppression effect was even more powerful than the demon-slaying sword. The power of Akeza's chaotic fist impact was also extremely domineering and powerful, but in countering Ryaji, this man who could make 10 slashes a second, and also had the blessing of demon god power, the power of the slash was naturally not weaker than Akeza's fist. And Akeza's annihilation style was at most 8 punches a second, 2 attacks less than Ryaji's 10 slashes a second. Just as Ryaji and Akeza collided fiercely again, Gyataro seized this opportunity, and took the opportunity to launch an attack on Ryaji. Blood Demon Art, rotating circular slashes, flying blood scythes. Flying blood scythes. This skill is Gyataro's strongest Blood Demon Art. Gyataro rotates at high speed, driving the sickles in his hands to create a huge tornado storm. The tornado storm not only radiates sharp sickles to the surroundings, but also generates a powerful suction force, firmly sucking the opponent around the flying blood scythes, and then causing them to be cut into pieces of meat by the sharp air blades, and the powerful tornado storm can also destroy everything within a radius of 50 meters. 488, Chapter 488. Just as Ryaji was fighting fiercely with Akeza and Gyataro, Tanjiro, carrying Makio and Suma, had already run a long distance, and had arrived at a relatively gentle area of the cliff wall. Great! Hurry up and go up. It will be much safer once we return to the mountain forest. Tanjiro then said excitedly. Just as everyone was excited, Makio's face suddenly changed, and then she immediately explained the situation to Tanjiro. Daki is chasing after us. What do we do? Tanjiro immediately put Makio down, and then turned his back and said, "You guys go quickly. I will hold her back." Hearing these words, Makio was also somewhat undecided, whether or not she should abandon Tanjiro and just leave like this. If she did not leave, what could she do if she stayed? We will either leave together or stay together. That white-haired young man has already taken risks for us, we cannot let you do this again this time. Suma then said at this time. Tanjiro saw that only Daki was chasing after them, and then thought that Ryaji had only held back Akeza, and had not held back Daki. However, Tanjiro did not think that Ryaji was anything because of this. Ryaji not holding back Daki was still a good thing in Tanjiro's view. Because in this way, Tanjiro could share some of the pressure for Ryaji. Ryaji did not have to bear all the pressure alone. Ryaji only dealing with Akeza was relatively safer. "Don't worry, I will be fine, she is also alone," Tanjiro said confidently. "There is no time, you guys go quickly. If Uzui-sensei and Zenitsu have not had any accidents, they should be in this mountain forest. You guys quickly go and join up with them, and let them come over to support us quickly. I can still hold on here." Tanjiro, looking at Daki who was approaching quickly, then urged anxiously. Hearing these words, Makio then reacted. Her husband must be chasing after her with the others, and so she no longer hesitated, and said, "Then be careful, you must hold on, I will go and join up with them immediately, and then bring people to support you." After she finished speaking, Makio then pulled Suma and continued to run forward. Makio planned to create a safe distance from Tanjiro, and then return to the mountain forest along the cliff that was no longer so steep. Although this cliff was no longer vertical, there was still a certain slope, and also it was raining heavily, and the cliff wall was slippery, so it was impossible to climb up the mountainside all at once. And also Daki was about to catch up. If they climbed the cliff now, they would probably be knocked down by Daki before they had climbed a few meters. So, even with Tanjiro holding her back, now was not a good time to go up the cliff wall. And Tanjiro, seeing that Makio and Suma had run away, felt relieved in his heart, and at the same time pulled out the Nichiren blade on his waist, and prepared for battle. The upper rank demon of the 12 Kazuki, this was an existence that Tanjiro had never come into contact with before, although he was now very different from before, and had become stronger than before, but similarly, his opponent had also become stronger. Would he be like the first time he encountered lower rank 5, and have no power to fight at all? Daki, who was chasing after him, saw that Tanjiro was no longer running away, and then felt very happy in her heart. Even if Makio and Suma ran away, Daki did not care at all, and did not intend to chase after Makio and Suma. Because, Tanjiro was the person that Muzan Kibutsuji wanted to kill the most, and also the target that had to be killed in this mission. As for the others, if they ran away, then they ran away, it was not important. 489, Chapter 489. Just as Daki's figure was rapidly approaching Tanjiro, when the figures of the two were still 20 or 30 meters away, Daki could not help but launch an attack on Tanjiro. Immediately, more than a dozen sashes grew out from Daki's back. those sashes were like sharp arrows, and shot towards the position where Tanjiro was standing. In the blink of an eye, they had already appeared in front of Tanjiro. So fast. Tanjiro's heart then shook. In the current situation, there was no possibility of dodging. The only thing he could do was to make a move and fight against it. Water breathing, first form, modified, water surface / chain /. Tanjiro's brain turned quickly, and in the instant when the sashes reached in front of him, he had already thought of a way to cope with it, and implemented it. At that moment, Tanjiro felt that the only thing that could fight against this kind of dense attack was the modified technique of water breathing, first form that he had learned from Ryaji. This was not the first time Tanjiro had used this technique in actual combat. He had used it once during the Infinity Train, and in the months after returning, Tanjiro had carried out many solo missions during this period, and Tanjiro had also used it in carrying out these missions. Because after mastering total concentration, constant, Tanjiro could be considered to be able to control water surface / chain / relatively well, so before this, Tanjiro rarely took out Ryaji's modified technique to use in actual combat, except for practicing in private. Although Tanjiro could make 12 slashes a second, from the books, he had 2 more slashes than Ryaji's 10 slashes a second. Tanjiro's 12 slashes and Ryaji's 10 slashes had a big difference. Tanjiro's 12 slashes were made under the premise of not caring about anything. To put it bluntly, it was a random slash. And water surface / chain / was also modified by Ryaji at the beginning in order to pursue the idea of extremely fast slashes, so Ryaji's early water surface / chain / was also a random slash. It was not that Tanjiro was randomly slashing. So there would inevitably be ineffective attacks. Ineffective attacks were slashes that were swung out without touching the enemy or object to be attacked. Simply put, it was a slash that would miss. For example, suppose a large number of apples were shot towards Tanjiro. Tanjiro used water surface / chain / to cut these apples, and under such fast slashes, Tanjiro would naturally not be able to ensure that every slash would hit the apple, so there would be a situation where he would miss, but in order to ensure that he would not miss every apple, he could only maintain the fastest sword speed to swing. This would not only be extremely exhausting, but would also generate more burden on the arm. This was also why Ryaji lost the ability to swing his sword after using water surface / chain / when he was dealing with the hand demon. In the end, he could only hand over the final blow to Tanjiro to complete against the hand demon. Therefore, after many battles, Ryaji had also realized this defect, and so he began to work hard on the accuracy of his attacks, and so the reason why Ryaji's sword speed did not increase but decreased was this, because Ryaji's current 10 slashes a second were 10 slashes that did not have any misses. They were 10 slashes that hit 100% of the time. If Ryaji did not care about missing, he could make 19 slashes a second, but if he maintained this number of slashes for a long time, the impact on his arm would be huge. That was to say, Ryaji's understanding and mastery of water surface / chain / had risen to a level, and Tanjiro's water surface / chain / was still at the lowest level. 490, Chapter 490. Regarding this point, Tanjiro naturally also knew, but to reach Ryaji's level, Tanjiro might still need a long time. Just as Tanjiro used water surface / chain / the sashes that burst out from Daki's body then immediately collided with Tanjiro's Nichiren blade. Tanjiro's slashes, which were fast as phantoms, then cut off the sashes that Daki had stabbed towards him. Although he had cut off the sashes, those more than 10 sashes still did not have any intention of stopping, and would continue to stab towards Tanjiro. Therefore, Tanjiro did not dare to stop the actions in his hands, and could only cut the entire section of sashes like cutting radishes. After Tanjiro did not know how many slashes he had made, all the sashes were then cut into pieces of cloth that were dancing all over the sky by Tanjiro, which made Tanjiro secretly breathe a sigh of relief in his heart. He had finally resolved Daki's attack. Although he had resolved Daki's dense attack, Tanjiro's arm was also somewhat exhausted and began to tremble slightly. Just as Tanjiro breathed a sigh of relief, in the next second, Daki's figure, like a ghost, suddenly appeared in front of Tanjiro. The distance between the two was very close. Daki's face was almost touching Tanjiro. Tanjiro could also clearly feel the breath that Daki's nose was exhaling. That breath was not any fragrance, but rather a very strong demon aura. Tanjiro was startled, and before Tanjiro could make any movements, Tanjiro's expression then changed, and there was a burst of tumbling pain in his abdomen. That kind of pain was like the pain of the internal organs in his stomach being torn apart. It turned out that when Daki approached Tanjiro, Daki heavily kneed Tanjiro in the stomach. Although Daki was not a demon who mainly focused on strength, as a demon, her own basic strength and physical strength would not be low. This blow, even if it did not take Tanjiro's life, would definitely not make Tanjiro feel good. 1 second after Daki's knee and Tanjiro's abdomen made contact, Tanjiro's figure was blasted out by the huge force, and then when he landed, he rolled a few times in the wet grass in a sorry state, and finally stopped after falling out more than 10 meters away. You really are a weakling. I really don't know why the Lord wants to kill you, this weakling. After knowing Tanjiro's strength, Daki could not help but ridicule Tanjiro. Since you are the person that the Lord has named to kill, then I will not take you for fun, I should send you on your way quickly. Daki continued to say to herself. After she finished speaking, 2 more sashes popped out from behind Daki again, and in the next second, the 2 sashes shot towards Tanjiro, who had fallen to the ground. Just as danger was approaching rapidly, Tanjiro's figure rotated at this critical moment. Because of this rotation, Daki's attack, which was originally going to pierce Tanjiro's head, pierced Tanjiro's shoulders all of a sudden, and also cut off the shoulder strap of the Mist Cloud Cedar wooden box. Tanjiro also knew that the shoulder strap had been cut off by the sashes, and so he immediately endured the pain, and took the opportunity to roll out, and finally, with the help of the inertia of the roll, he stood up again. The Mist Cloud Cedar wooden box containing Nezuko was left in the position just now. Raindrops kept hitting the wooden box, making crackling sounds. Tanjiro looked at the wooden box, but still resisted not going forward to hug the wooden box back. Because compared to his own situation, Nezuko was safe for the time being. Even if Tanjiro hugged the wooden box back, he could not fight while holding the wooden box. A dying struggle. Daki, seeing this, could not help but feel that Tanjiro was a dying cockroach. 491, Chapter 491. After Tanjiro stood still, he looked at Daki vigilantly, and also had his own judgment on the strength of the upper-rank demon. As expected, she is very strong. I can't keep up with the opponent's speed. The only thing that can fight against her is water surface slash, chain slash, but with the condition of my arm, I can only launch it 3 more times at most. Tanjiro secretly analyzed in his heart. Seeing that Tanjiro was still putting on a fighting stance, Daki could not help but feel that Tanjiro was somewhat naive. Was the situation not clear enough now? He was still thinking of putting up a stubborn resistance. You won't be thinking about how to defeat me, right? I will tell you clearly, even if you can really cut off my neck, I will not die. Daki could not help but say jokingly. The current Daki was not at all afraid of being beheaded. This was completely relying on the fact that she and Jayataro had a symbiotic relationship. As long as the necks of both of them were not cut off at the same time, even if Tanjiro cut off Daki's neck 100 times, Daki would be fine. And also now Daki and Jayataro were not in the same place, so it was also not very possible to cut off the necks of Daki and Jayataro at the same time. Because they were separated in 2 places, Ryaji and Tanjiro could not cooperate at all, so the possibility of Daki and Jayataro being cut off at the same time was lower than the probability of winning the lottery. What's more, Tanjiro did not have the ability to cut off Daki's neck very much. Hearing these words, Tanjiro could not help but be shocked in his heart. He had really not encountered a demon who was not afraid of being beheaded. Was Daki scaring him? Or was it that upper-rank demons were different from other demons? Just as Tanjiro was thinking too much, Daki then said, "Take a look at your Nichiren blade. It only blocked my attack once, and your blade has collapsed beyond recognition. With such a blade, you cannot cut off my neck." Daki's words made Tanjiro's line of sight then transfer to the blade of his Nichiren blade, and upon seeing it, he then discovered that there were indeed many cracks in the blade. Such a blade could be said to have become a crippled weapon, and it could no longer be repaired by sharpening the blade. Tanjiro was also somewhat surprised in his heart, and did not know why the blade would be like this at all. It seemed that every time he encountered a powerful enemy, his Nichiren blade would disappointingly break down. It was also like this during the Mount Nadagyumo incident that day, when facing lower rank 5, the blade was directly broken into 2 pieces. This time when he encountered upper rank 6, the blade was completely damaged just as the battle had begun. Was it a problem with the blade itself? Tanjiro could not help but suspect Hotaru Hagenjika's swordsmithing skills, or was it that this guy was using defective products to fool him? However, this suspicion was quickly ruled out by Tanjiro, because Hotaru Hagenjika's heart was not that black, and also Ryaji's dual-colored Nichiren blade was also forged by Hotaru Hagenjika. He had not seen Ryaji break it since he got that sword, so Tanjiro still felt that it was his own reason that caused the weapon to be damaged. The swordsmith who forged your sword is probably a third-rate guy. Forging such a garbage Nichiren blade, he and you are both a joke. Daki continued to ridicule. Bullshit. Mr. Hagenjika is a very amazing swordsmith. Ryaji-senpai's dual-colored Nichiren blade was forged by him. It is my reason that caused such a good Nichiren blade to be damaged. Tanjiro then immediately retorted. The sentence bullshit at the beginning directly caused Daki to be somewhat unable to react. After a few seconds, Daki's expression then revealed anger. 492, Chapter 492. You little brat. What did you say? Daki glared at Tanjiro and questioned. As soon as her voice fell, the sashes that were coiled behind Daki shot towards Tanjiro. Water breathing, third form, flowing dance. Seeing that Daki had launched an attack on him, Tanjiro immediately used flowing dance to dodge, but even with flowing dance, Tanjiro was still somewhat unable to keep up with Daki's speed. Just as he dodged the stabbing sashes, other sashes then sealed off the place where Tanjiro was about to land. Causing Tanjiro's footwork to be greatly restricted, Tanjiro had no choice but to be forced to take Daki's attack, and swung his sword again to cut at the sashes that were stabbing towards him. However, Tanjiro did not use water surface slash, chain slash to cope with it, because water surface slash, chain slash put a great burden on the arm, so it could not be used many times, unless Tanjiro reached Ryaji's level. Then he could reduce the burden on his arm by improving the accuracy, and lowering the number of slashes, so that he could control it freely. Although this could greatly reduce the burden on the arm, it was not possible to use it without restraint. If he kept using water surface slash, chain slash non-stop in battle, it would still cause a great load on the arm, thereby affecting the battle. It seemed that it would still cause a burden on the arm, but in reality, as long as he did not use it non-stop, even if he used water surface slash, chain slash 3 times in a short period of time, the load on the arm was not as serious as before, and it would not affect the battle. However, Tanjiro had not reached this level now, so the water surface slash, chain slash he was using now put a very large load on his arm. If he used it continuously in a short period of time, Tanjiro's arm would simply not be able to withstand it, but Ryaji would no longer have this situation, because Ryaji had sublimated the original water surface slash, chain slash to another level, greatly reducing the load of the technique on the arm. Tanjiro had not reached that level with the technique, so Tanjiro had to make a careful decision about the use of water surface slash, chain slash. Because once he used it excessively, it would easily cause his arm to be unable to support the battle anymore. Water breathing, fourth form, striking tide. In the end, Tanjiro chose to use the fourth form, striking tide, to cope with Daki's sashes. Striking tide was also a series of slashes, but compared to the sword speed of water surface slash, chain slash, striking tide was much slower. The sword speed of striking tide was 2 to 3 slashes a second. The speed depended on the user of the technique. Looking at it this way, striking tide seemed to be a slowed-down version of water surface slash, chain slash. Although both were a series of slashes, the way the two techniques were used was completely different, so striking tide and water surface slash, chain slash were two different things. The slash path of striking tide presented a winding wave shape, there was a meaning of turning, and the slash path of water surface slash was a straight horizontal slash. With different attack methods, the characteristics of the two techniques were also completely different. The attack of water surface slash was more straightforward, and faster, but the power was much inferior to striking tide. As Tanjiro used striking tide, the Nichiren blade in Tanjiro's hand then became like a winding torrent, entangled with Daki's sashes that were like spirit snakes. However, in this collision, Tanjiro's Nichiren blade did not cut off Daki's sashes. When the Nichiren blade touched Daki's sashes, it only deflected the sashes from their original attack trajectory. 493, Chapter 493. Also because Tanjiro's blade could no longer cut off Daki's sashes, when the blade collided with the high-speed moving sashes, a large number of sparks then rubbed out again. Although these sparks flashed by in the rainy weather, they also became a light that illuminated the surroundings. Tanjiro did not cut off Daki's sashes like he did just now. This was enough to see the hardness of Daki's sashes, otherwise it would not have damaged Tanjiro's Nichiren blade. This time, although Tanjiro used Striking Tide, which had more power than Water Surface Slash, because the blade was severely damaged, it could no longer support Tanjiro to cut off Daki's sashes. Those sashes that had deviated from their original attack trajectory, although they had avoided Tanjiro's vital parts, were still on an effective attack trajectory. Tanjiro's cheeks, arms, and waist were all scratched by the sashes that had brushed past, leaving behind blood marks. Tanjiro, seeing that the damaged blade could no longer cut off Daki's sashes, also felt a trace of panic in his heart. If he could not even cut off Daki's sashes, then there was even less to say about cutting off Daki's neck. At this critical moment, Tanjiro remembered the situation when he could not cut off the spider silk of lower rank 5 back then, and then immediately thought of using the method he used to deal with lower rank 5 to deal with Daki. Water breathing, 10th form, constant flux. The blade path of constant flux was more winding than Striking Tide, and it was used in conjunction with the footwork of flowing dance, and his own twist, to increase the power of the slash. Tanjiro, with the blessing of the two techniques, constant flux and flowing dance, approached Daki little by little, and charged up the power of the slash, and then took the opportunity to cut off Daki's neck with one slash. Daki, seeing that Tanjiro was still taking the initiative to approach her, then felt that Tanjiro was extremely ridiculous, and so she launched her Blood Demon Art on Tanjiro without any politeness. Blood Demon Art, 48-layer Demon Pierce. 48-layer Demon Pierce is Daki's strongest and only mastered Blood Demon Art. 12 sashes grow out from her back, and when the sashes stab towards the enemy at high speed, they will fission twice, thereby fissioning into 48 more sharp and hard sashes. And the front end of the sashes will be rolled into a pointed spike shape, in order to better penetrate the enemy. As soon as Daki activated 48-layer Demon Pierce, 48 sashes then attacked Tanjiro from different directions in an instant. Tanjiro, looking at the sashes that were shooting towards him like sharp arrows, was also somewhat stunned for a moment. What should he do with such a dense attack? Use Water Surface Slash, Chain Slash. Even if he used it, could he cut off these sashes? After all, his Nichiren blade was already damaged. If he could not cut off these sashes, then he would still be penetrated by these dense sashes. If it was Ryaji-senpai, he would have been able to cut off these sashes through water breathing. I really cannot use water breathing freely like Ryaji-senpai. My body is indeed the most compatible with the Hinokamai Kagura that my father passed down to me, but, the Hinokamai Kagura breathing is too powerful. Even though I have received Mr. Rengoku's guidance and special training, I am still unable to use the Hinokamai Kagura breathing for a long time. But there is no choice anymore, I must do this. At this critical moment of life and death, Tanjiro gave up using water breathing, and used the Hinokamai Kagura breathing. Hinokamai Kagura, Sun Halo Dragon Head Dance. 494, Chapter 494. Just as Ryaji and Akaza were colliding fiercely, Jayataro had already created the tornado storm with amazing destructive power. Just as Ryaji cut off Akaza's fists, Ryaji and Akaza were then sucked into the tornado storm by Jayataro's Black Evil Storm Kill. The surrounding weeds and gravel were also swept into Jayataro's Black Evil Storm Kill, and then were destroyed into fine dust all of a sudden, and even the raindrops falling from the sky were twisted into extremely fine water mist by the storm. Jayataro, in a situation where Akaza would also be attacked, launched his strongest Blood Demon Art, Black Evil Storm Kill without hesitation. He had the intention of taking the opportunity to retaliate against Akaza. After all, Akaza had foolishly watched the show from the side when Jayataro was being beaten by Ryaji. This point was naturally resented by Jayataro. So taking the opportunity to cut Akaza into pieces of meat could also be regarded as a little return gift from Jayataro to Akaza. And when Ryaji was sucked into the center of the storm by Jayataro's Black Evil Storm Kill, Ryaji immediately activated mimicry, and mimicked his body into the form of water again. Although this directly caused Ryaji's water form body to be twisted into water mist scattered everywhere by Jayataro's Black Evil Storm Kill in an instant, it could not cause any actual damage to Ryaji. Ryaji could still reshape his body that had turned into water mist again. In the mimicry state, unless Jayataro killed all the molecules that made up Ryaji, he could not kill Ryaji. Otherwise, the demon god power could always maintain all the connections between Ryaji's body molecules. What would happen if Ryaji's demon god power suddenly ran out at this time? If the demon god power was completely exhausted during the mimicry process, Ryaji could still maintain this state, but he would fall into a berserk state, and he must get the blood of a demon in time to calm the demon god down. If he did not get the blood of a demon in time, the demon god would torture Ryaji's soul to death, and then completely occupy Ryaji's body. In this way, it would not be known what the demon god would do with Ryaji's body. Jayataro's black evil storm kill lasted for more than 10 seconds, and then stopped in the end, and the surroundings within a radius of 30 meters had completely lost its vitality, because the weeds that symbolized vitality had not even left their roots, and had all been twisted into dust particles by the tornado storm. The pressure walls on both sides were also scraped out of an inwardly concave arc area by the tornado storm, and that area that had been affected by the attack wave had become a wasteland, except for Jayataro, who was standing there safe and sound. Ryaji and Akaza had disappeared. It seemed that the two had never existed in this world at all. The heavy rain fell again. Jayataro then suddenly laughed wantonly. This laugh was more of a laugh at killing Ryaji. The matter is resolved, I am going to find Daki. After Jayataro said to himself, he then flashed and left. And just as Jayataro left, a bloody skeleton crawled out of the grass in the distance. That skeleton was covered in blood, and some flesh was still attached to the bones. And upon closer inspection, it could be found that many sarcomas suddenly grew out of the terrifying blood skeleton's body quickly and wrapped it up. And those sarcomas changed little by little. As the shape of the sarcomas covering the blood skeleton's face gradually became clear, it was then possible to identify that the blood skeleton that had been stripped of its flesh was actually Akaza. 495, Chapter 495. The reason why Akaza had become like that just now was naturally thanks to Jayataro. With that kind of tornado storm power, if it was an ordinary person, their body would definitely not be able to be kept intact. The reason why Akaza could keep his skeleton was naturally because Akaza's skeleton was hard enough. Jayataro's attack was not enough to cut Akaza's bones into pieces. And at this time, Akaza's heart was naturally extremely angry. The point of Akaza's anger was more that Jayataro had just run away like that, rather than Jayataro making him look like that. After all, Jayataro's attack would definitely not be able to kill him. Akaza was angry that Jayataro had just run away so blindly and confidently. If it was someone else, Akaza could still be sure that they would not be able to survive a frontal attack from Jayataro's black evil storm kill, even if the opponent was a pillar. But Ryaji had to be treated differently. Akaza did not think that Ryaji would be killed by Jayataro so easily. But since Jayataro had left, Akaza did not need to chase after him either, because if Jayataro went to find Daki, Tanjiro would definitely not be able to survive. And Akaza did not chase after him, but rather chose to stay and see Ryaji's situation again. He had to hold Ryaji back. He absolutely could not let Ryaji meet with the others in the Demon Slayer Corps, especially Tanjiro. However, just as Akaza had almost completely recovered his body, Akaza then discovered that his palms had not grown back, but the severed ends of his palms had been wrapped in flesh. Akaza was not only very puzzled in his heart, but also felt a trace of panic and fear. Soon, Akaza then recalled that his two palms had been cut off by Ryaji. Thinking of this, Akaza then took the initiative to stimulate the cells in his body to regenerate. But it was of no use at all. Akaza did not feel even a trace of regeneration. It was different from the situation last time. Last time Akaza's regeneration and recovery speed was only suppressed. As long as Akaza forcibly stimulated the cells, his severed limbs could still grow back, but the speed of growth was much slower than when it was not suppressed. But this time, it was completely not the same thing. This time, with the intervention of demon god power, it directly sealed off Akaza's regeneration and recovery ability in a short period of time. As for how long it could be sealed off, it was not known. This sealing was not sealing in the true sense, but rather the place injured by the demon god power was sealed, otherwise Akaza could not have recovered from the state of a blood skeleton. What Akaza could no longer regenerate was the severed part of his palms. As for other parts, he could still regenerate now. If Akeza's feet were injured by demon god power again, Akeza's legs would also not be able to regenerate and recover in a short period of time. However, Akeza still refused to give up, and directly destroyed one arm with the other arm, and then tried to let the arm regenerate again. And the severed arm that had been actively destroyed by Akeza was then quickly regenerated, but the regenerated arms still did not have palms. What's going on? What did that guy do to me? Why can't my palms regenerate? The fear in Akeza's heart became even stronger, and then he muttered to himself somewhat irrationally. Just as Akeza was muttering to himself, Ryaji's figure then emerged from the ground. 496, Chapter 496. After Ryaji, who had transformed into a water form through mimicry, was twisted into water mist by Jyotaro's black evil storm kill, he splashed on the rock walls in 2 places. Afterwards, Ryaji activated stealth, allowing all of his body that had become a water form to enter the stealth space. Next, Ryaji then gathered all of his body that had been scattered into water mist, and then controlled the body that had been divided into 2 parts, and stealthily moved from the rock wall to the ground below, and finally completely merged his body back into a whole, and also released the mimicry state, and floated out of the ground. Akeza, seeing Ryaji float out of the ground, could not help but be shocked. This shock was not a surprise that Ryaji had not died, but a shock of fear towards Ryaji, because Akeza had already guessed that Ryaji could not have died so easily. At the same time, Akeza's figure could not help but retreat a few steps. After Ryaji returned to the ground, he looked around, and after discovering that Jyotaro was gone, he then looked at Akeza, and quickly discovered the abnormality of Akeza's arms, and quickly thought that it was because the demon god power had taken effect. However, Ryaji did not know how long the demon god power would suppress the upper rank demon, and whether the upper rank demon had the ability to forcibly erase the demon god power. Your palms can't grow back, can they? Ryaji asked knowingly. Hearing these words, Akeza turned his fear of Ryaji into anger, and roared, "What did you do to me? Losing the ability to regenerate and recover, has made you so afraid. It seems that demons are all cowards." "That's right, if you weren't afraid of death, you wouldn't become demons." Ryaji continued to launch a verbal offensive against Akeza. Akeza had been affected by various negative emotions, and did not know how to verbally counter Ryaji for a while. "The game is over. You will die tonight." Ryaji no longer continued to talk nonsense, and also had a real intention to kill Akeza. As soon as his voice fell, Ryaji had already raided in front of Akeza, and at the same time, the demon-slaying sword covered with demon god power then swung towards Akeza's neck. Annihilation type, Meshaki. Although Akeza's fear of Ryaji had been engraved into his bones at this time, when faced with his life being threatened, Akeza still made a response at the first moment. Akeza originally thought that he could use Annihilation type to force back Ryaji's attack, but Ryaji relied on activating the demon god transformation this time, and had no intention of dodging at all, but rather planned to carry Akeza's attack, and forcefully kill Akeza. The ice blades that burst out from the compass needle ice flower formation under Akeza's feet almost all hit Ryaji's body head-on. The dense ice blades only broke through the demon god's black aura protection, and slightly scratched Ryaji's skin. It was not that the demon god's black aura protection was not strong enough, but rather the number of ice blades that burst out was very large, and also very dense. This was how they could break through the black aura protection around Ryaji's body. Akeza, seeing that Ryaji was not afraid at all, and also Annihilation type had not caused any damage to Ryaji, Akeza instinctively raised his hands, and then took the initiative to block the slash that Ryaji was about to swing at his neck. As Akeza blocked like this, Ryaji's demon-slaying sword then cut off half of Akeza's forearm all of a sudden. Despite this, Ryaji's slash did not stop, and continued to go with the flow. And Akeza, who had a very strong desire to survive, also shrank his neck back, but Akeza still did not completely dodge Ryaji's fatal slash. Ryaji's demon-slaying sword still touched Akeza's neck, but unfortunately, it did not completely cut off Akeza's neck. It only opened a very deep cut in Akeza's neck, and a large amount of blood then spurted out. Akeza's figure was unsteady, and he staggered and fell to the ground. But Akeza did not dare to stay too long, and immediately fled in the opposite direction from where Tanjiro had fled. 497, Chapter 497. Akeza's escape speed was very fast, almost in the blink of an eye, he had already run more than 50 meters away. Ryaji did not choose to pursue at the first moment. With Akaza's escape speed, it was clear that his desire to survive was very strong. With Akaza only thinking about saving his life in his heart, Ryaji would really have to waste some effort to catch up with Akaza. But in reality, Ryaji did not have extra time to pursue Akaza, because Jayataro had gone to support Daki. He had not managed to keep Daki at that time, so the possibility of Tanjiro being chased by Daki was very high, therefore Ryaji had to rush back to defend. If he chose to pursue Akaza, then it would be no different from being restrained by him. Ryaji could still tell which situation was more important. Secondly, Ryaji's demon god power had also been almost completely consumed in the fierce battle, so without the blessing of demon god transformation, Ryaji's success rate of pursuing Akaza was not very high. The most important thing was that he had to rush back to the red light district. He did not know whether Uzui Tengen had withstood Kokushibo's interception. If Uzui Tengen had not withstood Kokushibo's attack, after Kokushibo killed Uzui Tengen, would his next step be to directly rush towards Tanjiro? Or would he massacre the civilians of the Yoshiwara red light district? All of this did not allow Ryaji to continue to entangle with Akaza. Soon, Ryaji then released the demon god transformation state. The Akaza's blood remaining on the blade of the demon-slaying sword was also greedily absorbed into the sword body by the demon-slaying sword, and before long, the broadcast of the superdimensional transversal system sounded. Demon-slaying sword level breakthrough, ordinary top grade, spiritual grade, top grade. Attribute effect increased by 20%, current regeneration suppression efficiency, 40%, effect doubled against demons below upper rank. Almost at the same time, the broadcast of the mission completion also sounded. Mission, rescue Makio and Suma. Mission completed, host successfully rescued number of people, 2. Mission reward issued, host unlocks the domain ability of Transparent World, unlocks the Stigma ability. Transparent World domain, activation method, activate on your own. After activation, the host will close off the excess senses of the body, gain more powerful perception and reaction, and also completely hide their aura during the battle. Stigma ability, activation method, passively activated. Activation condition, automatically activated when the heartbeat reaches a frequency of 200 times per minute or more. After the stigma is activated, all attribute values are increased by 50%, increasing the basic ability of the activator. State changes after activation, stigma with special patterns will appear in various places on the activator's skin, and at the same time, the body temperature will also rise sharply, reaching a temperature that ordinary people cannot reach. Ryaji listened to the broadcast of the superdimensional transversal system while rushing back. The sounding of the system broadcast allowed Ryaji to confirm that Makio and Suma were already safe, otherwise, the system would not broadcast the news of the mission completion. After getting the mission reward, it greatly increased Ryaji's confidence in dealing with Kokushibo, because Ryaji did not have demon god power to activate demon god transformation now. Of course, it was also possible for Ryaji to really activate it, but he would soon fall into a berserk state after activation. The feeling of being tormented by the demon god was not good. Ryaji did not want to try it. It was a kind of pain from the depths of his soul. So Ryaji would not use demon god transformation while being tormented by the demon god, because that was equivalent to using it at the cost of burning his soul. If he was not careful, he would not know how he died. 498, Chapter 498. Akaza, who had successfully preserved his life without being pursued by Ryaji, had already escaped back into the mountain forest, and then leaned against a large tree. At this time, Akaza's aura was very weak, and his neck was constantly bleeding. The amount of bleeding was like turning on a faucet. Although Ryaji's attack did not completely cut off Akaza's neck, it did cut open Akaza's neck artery, and the blood was flowing out of the large artery. This would not have caused any impact on Akaza originally, but Ryaji's attack with demon god power caused Akaza's neck to be unable to heal at all. It was also the reason why Akaza kept running away after being attacked, because Akaza knew that Ryaji's attack could prevent his wound from healing, so if he did not run, the result would be death. No matter how awesome an upper-rank demon was, they still relied on their powerful self-healing ability. If they lost this ability, they would also be worn down to death. Fortunately, along the way, the stress response of Akaza's body stimulated the body to constantly produce fresh blood to continuously replenish the lost blood, which prevented his body from going into shock. It could be said that the demon's regeneration and recovery ability saved Akaza's life. Although the wound could not heal, it did not affect the activity that other cells should have. And Akaza, who was leaning against the tree trunk, was constantly sweating all over his body, and at the same time, his expression was extremely terrified. This kind of terror was a terror of the unknown, because Akaza did not know whether his wound had any possibility of healing. If it did not, would he have to be like this all the time? Then he might as well die. However, this kind of panic was suppressed by Akaza before long. Akaza, who had regained his senses slightly, first controlled the blood system of his body, and cut off the blood supply to the artery in his neck, which then controlled the massive bleeding. After cutting off the artery's blood supply, Akaza switched to using venous blood to supply blood to the brain. Although for ordinary people, venous blood could only flow back, it was not difficult for demons to replan the blood system. Akaza avoided the injured artery, and after replanning the blood system, he then stabilized the situation of his body. Although Akaza was very likely to be held accountable by Muzan Kibutsuji this time, Akaza felt that he had really tried his best. Ryaji was like a bottomless pit, showing his abilities that he could not cope with at the moment again and again. What Akaza was praying for now was that Daki would successfully resolve Tanjiro, so that he could be considered to have completed the mission he should have done. As for Kokushibo's side, Akaza did not have the heart to pay attention to it. If there was a next time, Akaza would rather face the encirclement and suppression of the 9 pillars than face Ryaji one-on-one. It would be best to hand it over to those demons who said sarcastic remarks to him to deal with, so that those guys could know that they were also incompetent. After Tanjiro left alone to hold back Daki, Makio and Suma then successfully returned to the mountain forest along the less steep cliff. Because Makio had walked back and forth with Akaza twice, she was still relatively familiar with the route, so she took Suma and found the way back. On the way, Makio and Suma soon bumped into Inashuk, Zenitsu Agatsuma, and Hattori Kyujo, who were searching for Ryaji and Tanjiro in the mountain forest. Upon seeing Inashuk, Makio was very happy, and pulled Suma to meet him. 499, Chapter 499. After Hattori Kyujo saw Makio and Suma, she could not help but feel happy in her heart. Makio and Suma had successfully escaped, then she could just get the location of Ryaji and Tanjiro from them. Ryaji and Tanjiro were not with Makio and Suma, then they must have clashed with demons, so she had to go and support Ryaji and Tanjiro as soon as possible. Where is Captain Ryaji? Where is Uzui-sama? As soon as they met, Hattori Kyujo and Makio, these two women, asked at the same time. The simultaneous questioning could not help but make the two look at each other. Hattori Kyujo then immediately explained, Uzui-sama is in the red light district fighting against the head of the upper ranks, Kokushibo, together with Butterfly-sama and Purgatory-sama. We are here to support Captain Ryaji. Hearing these words, Makio asked, what happened in the red light district? We were originally tailing you behind, but we encountered Kokushibo's interception before we left the red light district. After Butterfly-sama and Purgatory-sama came to reinforce us, we were able to escape to support Captain Ryaji and Tanjiro. Hattori Kyujo also simply explained the situation to Makio. After she finished speaking, Hattori Kyujo then asked, where is Captain Ryaji? Please take us there quickly. After knowing the general situation, Makio no longer asked any more questions, but rather thought of Tanjiro, who was still facing danger alone, compared to her husband fighting against the upper ranks with the other pillars in the red light district. Tanjiro and Ryaji were the ones who needed support the most. Follow me. Makio no longer procrastinated, and immediately turned around and went back to guide Hattori Kyujo and the others. Tanjiro, hold on. This great me is coming. Inashuk also became excited. Wait. Hattori suddenly called out to Makio again. Zenitsu is currently in a sleeping state. Someone must be left here to take care of Zenitsu. If we bring Zenitsu over, in his state, he will affect our ability to fight. After Hattori Kyujo finished speaking, she then put Zenitsu Agatsuma down from her back. After leaving the red light district, Hattori Kyujo had been carrying Zenitsu Agatsuma on her back all along. If Zenitsu Agatsuma had not shown his strength when fighting Kokushibo, Hattori Kyujo would really not have been willing to carry Zenitsu Agatsuma on her back. I will stay and take care of him. Suma then stood up and said at this time. Suma was the one with the lowest combat power among Uzui Tenjin's 3 wives, and also the most delicate and cute, so Suma herself was a more suitable candidate to stay. Secondly, Makio was more familiar with the route, and Suma was not familiar with the route of the mountain forest. With Suma's self-recommendation, the others did not have any objections. Anyway, it was impossible for Hattori Kyujo and Inashuk to stay behind. Afterwards, Inashuk and Hattori Kyujo then followed Makio and went back again. Returning to the point in time when Daki used her blood demon art, 48-layer demon pierce, on Tanjiro, facing Daki's blood demon art, after rapid and extensive thinking, Tanjiro then used the Sun Halo Dragon Head Dance of the Hinokamai Kagura to cope with it. At the moment when Tanjiro activated the technique, raging flames then burned around Tanjiro's body. Under the drive of Tanjiro's figure, a huge fire dragon with a majestic aura charged towards Daki with the force of overturning rivers and seas. That fire dragon was even bigger than the fire dragon formed by the flame-breathing, 6th form, flame explosion, and this fire dragon was not only coiling around Tanjiro's body, but rather was like a living thing, keeping in line with Tanjiro's figure, and charged towards Daki's direction together. 500, Chapter 500. Under the blessing of Hinokamai Kagura, Sun Halo Dragon Head Dance, the dragon's head took the lead, scattering and bouncing away all the dense sashes that Daki had stabbed over. Tanjiro took advantage of this momentum, and forged ahead all the way. The Nichiren blade was like the sharp teeth and claws of the fire dragon. As Tanjiro swung his sword, the fire dragon also made corresponding biting and clawing attack postures, but in reality, these attacks were all swung out by Tanjiro. This time, there was no situation where he could not cut off the sashes. Tanjiro's every slash was like cutting chives, easily cutting off the sashes that Daki had stabbed towards him with one slash. And at this time, the blade of Tanjiro's Nichiren blade was also burning with raging flames. After Daki's sashes were cut off by the Nichiren blade with flames, the cut then burned up immediately. At the same time as the sashes were cut off, Daki then screamed suddenly. It seemed that the attack had brought her unbearable pain. Why does my body have a disgusting feeling? This aura is also disgusting. Daki did not expect that Tanjiro could burst out with such energy. Seeing that her ultimate move had been resolved, Daki also felt somewhat flustered in her heart. However, Daki's fluster was only temporary, and soon the feeling of panic was replaced by anger. Don't think that you can kill me like this. The pillars who have died in my hands can't be counted on 2 hands. How can you, a brat who has not even reached the pillar level, kill me? Daki then scolded angrily, and then suddenly leaped backwards, taking the initiative to create distance from Tanjiro, and at the same time controlled the remaining sashes, no longer actively to meet Tanjiro, but rather went around to Tanjiro's back, attacking Tanjiro's defensive loopholes. This was actually also a strategy to force Tanjiro to stop. If Tanjiro did not care about the situation behind him, then Daki could pierce his heart or head from behind Tanjiro. If Tanjiro forcibly defended, then he would naturally lose the opportunity to break through to her. Hinokamai Kagura, Fake Rainbow. Hinokamai Kagura, Fake Rainbow. This technique is a dodging technique, using the muscles of the waist to perform high-speed twisting and rotation. It can complete dodges at various angles. The dodging speed is extremely fast. Only people with extremely keen visual senses may be able to capture Tanjiro's dodging after images. Just as the sashes that had gone around to the back were about to touch Tanjiro's back, Tanjiro's figure then suddenly appeared behind the sashes strangely, and then his figure then broke through to Daki again, and at the same time cut off the 3 sashes that had almost ambushed him with one slash. In the next second, Tanjiro then appeared in front of Daki. This time it was Tanjiro's turn to scare Daki. It's over. Tanjiro's Nichiren blade, which had been aiming at Daki's neck, then immediately slashed towards Daki's neck. At the moment when Tanjiro's Nichiren blade touched Daki's neck then twisted strangely along the direction of Tanjiro's slash. Although Tanjiro's attack was very powerful, Daki's neck could twist strangely, and was also unusually soft. The blade could not cut into her neck at all. Daki used an abnormally exaggerated contraction of flexibility to buffer most of the force of Tanjiro's slash, so that Tanjiro's slash could not cut into her neck at all. You are too naive. I am an upper rank of the 12 Kazuki. I am different from the garbage you have killed. Daki poured a basin of cold water on Tanjiro's face, extinguishing his excited mood of thinking that he could cut off Daki's neck like this.
Every novel listed in the description comes with permanent access to the audiobook on Telegram. You pay once, and if the novel is still ongoing, you'll receive all future updates automatically. No extra cost. Choose your novel from the description, then DM me on Telegram, WhatsApp, or Discord. After payment via PayPal, Ko-Fi, or Patreon, you'll get instant access. Simple, secure, lifetime listening. Guys, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button. Your support means a lot.